Welcome to the Falmouth Chamber of Commerce.
The Falmouth Chamber is dedicated to working on behalf of our members to make Falmouth a better place to live, work, and conduct business. We are committed to developing the economic, cultural, educational, and civic interests of our community and welcome the support from all organizations to achieve our combined goals. Whether you call Falmouth home, are a summer resident, or a visitor, we hope you take advantage of all that the Chamber has to offer.
Holiday Inn Falmouth opened year-round for your business and travel needs. We provide a full restaurant and accommodations for banquets, holiday parties, weddings, corporate events, seminars, and more. Featuring KC Bar and Grill, where guests or Falmouth residents can enjoy our selection of local craft beers, cocktails, and a variety of pub food from our menu. Holiday Inn Falmouth, your home away from home.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Monday, June 4th, 2018 Selectmen's meeting. This is the open session before executive session with respect to General Laws Chapter 30A, Section 21A3 for the following three items. To discuss the resolution of all the turbine litigation, with respect to Ballymead versus Town of Falmouth, report on settlement, and with respect to Best Revenge 5 LLC versus the Town of Falmouth, report on mediation. And as chair, I declared that not to go into executive session would prejudice the town's position in each of those three matters, and that we will return to open session.
Second.
Thank you. By roll call.
Brown eye.
Patterson, aye.
English Braga, aye.
Moran, aye.
Jones eye.
Thank you. Welcome everyone to the Monday, June 4, 2018 Board of Selectmen's meeting, open session. We'll have a pledge allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, we have some proclamations. The first one is for Cape Cod Pride Day. Do we have any takers, Doug?
It's a proclamation for Cape Cod Pride Day by Falmouth Selectmen on the occasion of Cape Cod Pride Day, a celebration of our LGBTQ community, held Saturday, June 24th, at Falmouth High School. Whereas Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Pride Month, LGBT Pride Month, is currently celebrated each year in the month of June to honor the 1969 Stonewall riots in Manhattan, which marks the beginning of the gay rights movement in the United States. And whereas Cape Cod Pride, Inc., sponsor of Cape Cod Pride Day, is committed to celebrating diversity and working to diminish isolation, bias, and prejudice, and promote connection within the LGBTQ community, with the allied community, and with the community at large. Whereas the Town of Falmouth prides itself on being a welcoming and inclusive community that celebrates diversity, therefore, we, the Selectmen of Falmouth, hereby declare June 24th, 2018 to be Cape Cod Pride Day in Falmouth.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
And I know that Elias
President
Lieberman is here. I don't know if you just wanted to say a few words about the event.
Good evening. I'm Elias Lieberman, a member of the Planning Committee for the Pride celebration this year, and I want to thank the Board of Selectmen on behalf of Cape Cod Pride Incorporated for this proclamation. I just want to point out something wonderful that happened yesterday. Some of you may be aware of an email and an online news feed called The Daily Beast. It had a wonderful article which talked about pride celebrations in small communities, and it focused on 3 across the nation, one of which was Falmouth. So that information will be seen probably by millions of people, and I think we have reason to be proud. You should pardon the pun.
Congratulations.
But this is absolutely a community event. I want to leave with the board a flyer which describes some of it, as well as that Daily Beast article for your interest.
Appreciate that.
Would you just want to tell for folks who won't see the flyer what day it is and the time and where?
Thank you. It's being held at Falmouth High School on Sunday the 24th from noon until 4. There will be entertainment. We're expecting Congressman Keating to speak. State Senator Julian Sear will be speaking. We will be hearing from Patricia King, the first U.S. Army infantry soldier to come out as a transgender person. There will be music, there will be food, there will be vendors, there will be communal organizations. Last year, despite torrential rains, we had about 450 people. We have plenty of parking this year. We're expecting a huge crowd.
Thank you.
Thank you. May I leave these with you?
Please do.
And where'd you get your tie?
Online.
There'll be a run on them after this event.
Absolutely.
Next, we have the proclamation Falmouth Gun Buyback Day, Saturday, June 9, 2018.
Sure. Be a pleasure. Whereas the town of Falmouth recognizes that unwanted and unsecured guns in the home may increase threats to child safety, increase the likelihood of suicide attempts, and pose a threat to domestic safety in general. Whereas responsible gun ownership requires vigilance, and unsecured guns or careless storage may result in accidental injury and death, especially with youth. Whereas having a designated day to turn in unwanted guns to the police for food gift cards removes guns from unsafe storage and makes all Falmouth safer for the above reasons. Now, therefore, we, Susan L. Moran, Megan English Braga, Douglas Jones, Samuel H. Patterson, and Douglas C. Brown, as selectmen of the town of Falmouth, by authority voted in us to call upon the citizens of Falmouth to participate in the 2018 Gun Buyback Day and proclaim Saturday, June 9th, 2018 as Falmouth Gun Safety Day, and endorses the Falmouth Gun Buyback Day of 2018. In witness thereof, we have hereon to set our hand and cause the great seal of the town of Falmouth to be affixed.
Can I have a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great, and are there hours for that? Does anyone know? The hours for the buyback?
Mr. Stones.
Mr. Stone's here, if you want to just say a couple of specifics. Thanks for coming.
Yes, the hours are this Saturday from 9 a.m. to noon. And I really just want to thank the community for the amount of support that we've gotten. There's 2 components to this effort. One is, of course, to raise the money to get the food gift cards. And the second, of course, is to get the community aware that this is an opportunity to turn in the gun. So wonderful support from the community. We've hit our fundraising goal, and I want to thank the entire community of Falmouth, as well as the selectmen who've helped out as well, too.
And
Thank
the
you.
hardworking volunteers like you.
I'd say.
Thanks very much. Next, we have a proclamation with respect to the Day of Portugal, June 10, 2018. Ms. Braga.
Okay. Proclamation. Whereas the town of Falmouth is home to a large number of Portuguese American people, and whereas the Portuguese culture is praiseworthy and world famous, and whereas Luís Vaz de Camões, the famous 16th century epic poet, is a symbol of Portuguese cultural achievements and is honored by Portuguese people the world over, and whereas members and friends of the Portuguese have formed an association to foster Portuguese culture and instill a pride in heritage, and whereas a committee was organized to plan a celebration of these days, the Day of Portugal, the remembrance of the dearly departed, and whereas Falmouth joins with other Portuguese communities in recognition of Luís Vaz de Camões' great accomplishments of recording Portugal's notable and remarkable history to be promoted on this day, and whereas this June, the President of Portugal, Marcelo Rebelo de Souza, and Vasco Cordero, the President of the Regional Government of the Azores, will visit the United States, including Boston, for a special celebration of the Day of Portugal. Now, therefore, we, Susan L. Moran, Megan English Braga, Doug Jones, Samuel H. Patterson, and Douglas C. Brown, as selectmen of the town of Falmouth by the authority vested in us, do hereby proclaim June 10th, 2018 as Day of Portugal.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
And just a reminder that the celebration in this town for the Day of Portugal is the day before, which is June 9th. At the Navigator, there might still be tickets available. It's a great event. The President of Portugal will be in Boston on the 10th, and then on the 11th, he'll actually be in New Bedford again, and I believe that Julian might be attending an event there to welcome
I'm hoping to be able to, yes.
So, very exciting.
Great. Next, we have recognition, Ms. Braga.
Just a general happy recognition that we had the graduation from Falmouth High School this past weekend. It was a wonderful event, beautiful weather, the best weather we've really had in a long time. And certainly just an enormous accomplishment for all of those young graduates, their families, and of course the school. And it was a safe weekend, so that's always a wonderful thing as well. So just a lot of congratulations and best wishes for the class of 2018.
And all the parents and teachers, great job. And next we have perfect timing. Senator DiMacedo has arrived right on cue with respect to the restoration of the pilot payment, which is the payment in lieu of taxes. So Senator DiMacedo did some very quick and thorough work to help Falmouth, and we asked him here today to just give us some backdrop and to thank him for that. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to the members of the Board of Selectmen. Just an honor to be here. Just wanted to back up just a little bit to give you some background on what happened. And it was one of my colleagues, Mike Rodriguez, is from Westport, and he had come to find out because he had one of his selectmen had found out that they were going to lose $400,000 due to the payment in lieu of taxes, and so he started doing some research. Well, as he was talking, he noticed the next town on the list was the town of Falmouth, and was a good friend of mine, and he says, "Do you know about this?" And of course, at the time, we hadn't heard about it because most communities have no idea that this was changing. What happened is every 4 years, the Department of Revenue, for all the state-owned land where we get payment in lieu of taxes, will reevaluate those properties. And that's, in fact, what happened here in the town of Falmouth. They reevaluated the properties, and some communities increased in value because of the analysis they did, and some decreased. The state puts in approximately $26 million a year for state-owned land. And so depending on how it breaks up on where the values of the land, it shifts up and down. And of course, in the town of Falmouth, in that particular case, it actually went down significantly to the tune of $308,000. So had you not been looking for it, you wouldn't have found it until, of course, it wasn't until the cherry sheets came out, and you've got that. So when he brought that to my attention, we decided that we would have a meeting with the Department of Revenue so they could kind of explain to us how they came to this analysis. And of course, it's very complicated how they do this, but they have literally books on every community that they put out, and they evaluate state-owned land. And so all these different communities that have large tracts of state-owned land that they don't get property tax from, they do this payment in lieu of taxes. And to that extent, we met with them. We tried to figure out if there was anything we could do. We tried to be creative, and ultimately they know their stuff, and the long and short of it is that the town would, because of the valuations, would be out to $308,000. With you not knowing, though, we were able to make my colleague Mike and I decided that under the circumstances where many communities didn't know, and it was about a $1.8 million change in revenue, what we did is in this year's budget, we added $1.8 million to the bottom line of that payment in lieu of taxes line item. So instead of being the $26 million, we increased it by $1.8 million. And so for 1 year, you will be held harmless. So the town of Falmouth will be held harmless for this year. That being said, the bad news is that it won't be in perpetuity because there has been the changes, and unless, of course, we can continue to make the case that we should be putting more money in that line item, it will adjust backwards. So my suggestion, we initially thought, well, let's try to get half of the money if we could do that, just to kind of soften the blow for you. But ultimately we said, why don't we just get the 1.8 million will solve the problem for this year because communities didn't know, and a lot of people would be getting the sticker shock too late, and you can't adjust for it. And next year you'll have to prepare for it. So with that whole amount, my suggestion would be maybe you do a little bit this year to soften the blow, and then use it for the following year, and then you can kind of glide outward towards that loss of revenue. And so that's just a little backdrop on it, but the good news is in this particular year, the town of Falmouth doesn't lose the $308,000 that it otherwise would have. So I want to thank Julie and yourself. I know you and I have been going back and forth quite a bit on this, and I feel like it's in the scope of things with about budgets being challenging, it was kind of a little bit of good news that we were able to pull off and make the case that this was certainly a surprise to not just the town of Falmouth or Westport, but many of the communities that were affected negatively.
I just appreciate you coming out and explaining everything. I want to certainly give the other selectmen a chance for questions, but the folks should know the minute the senator found out, he called me on my cell phone. He was problem solving. He wanted to do a deep dive. We worked with Julian, Trish Pavuli, the finance director, and just really tried to look at this and kick the tires from all ends to try to do the best thing possible to either correct it if it was a mistake or to lessen the blow to the taxpayers. And I just really appreciate the senator jumping on this to the level of detail and attention that he did. I don't know if anyone might have
Sam was first.
Sam, sure.
Yeah. Just recently, Vinnie, we found out that the Steamship Authority is not part of the payment in lieu of taxes. And that's shocked me because obviously they own a considerable amount of real estate in the town, and they purchased it for parking lots and such. And it just doesn't seem fair in a way. I know they bring a lot of benefits to the town, the way of employment and what have you, but they do displace property that would yield real estate taxes, and I thought that was actually the intention of the payment in lieu of taxes.
Yeah, and it's
right?
not. It's not specific to that, but that's an excellent point. And it's, it's probably something that we should try to take a look into, because I'm not, I don't know specifically how this was a large tract of land that you had, that the town has, that's state-owned land, but not specifically to the Steamship Authority. But it's probably not a bad question to ask, and now that you've raised it, I'm certainly going to look into it, because that might work towards an adjustment into the following year, where why was that not considered? I don't know the answers to that, because it's one of those public entities, but I certainly will look into that and try to get you an answer for that, because I think it's an excellent question, and I'm surprised that you don't get any money in the payment in lieu of taxes in regards to that. I don't know the answer to that, but I assume you're telling me that that's the case.
Well, that's what we were told.
Okay.
And that was by Steve Sayers.
In a 20-page document.
Pardon me?
In about a 20-page document.
Yeah,
Defending all the
right.
reasons why.
We'll
they
get you
didn't have to
copies.
work
Now,
on it.
they do give us embarkation fees.
No,
that
they don't.
collect.
No, the embarkation fees are the person going on board pays it
Yes.
to us. It does not, the Steamship Authority does not pay those at all.
That's true. That's a good point.
Right.
So it's the organization itself is not necessarily compensating it for the services that we do provide in the way of infrastructure.
We will give you that backdrop, though. Doug?
So it's interesting that the property values are decreasing when it's a good economy, and most property values are increasing. Do you have a...
So the analysis is we get $26 million, the state puts in $26 million regardless.
Mm-hmm.
And in some cases, property values are increasing in some places, and and it's not that they're really decreasing, it's just that of that percentage of the 26 million, some are shifting up higher in different areas, and some are decreasing. And in some cases, where it's like oceanfront property, the entire parcel of land was considered oceanfront property, yet there was a lot of parcel of land that was on the inside. So I'll give you an example. When we met with the Department of Revenue, they showed us Horseneck Beach from Westport. And so they had the whole chart, and they showed this large parcel of land. And of course, on the ocean side, that land, and that's how they judge the cost of oceanfront property along the ocean side. But the entire width of the property, there's land on the inside that really isn't oceanfront land, but that was being valued at the same amount as the other land. So when they readdressed and analyzed the property, what they came to find out is what years ago, they actually, Department of Revenue, made a mistake in the valuation of, and I forgive me for not bringing you the exact details to the town of Falmouth, but they did explain it to us, that these parcels were not as valuable here as the ones that were oceanfront, and yet they were all characterized as one parcel. And so that's why it's not that property value should be going up, but that would be to say that, and this is probably a shortcoming on the state's level, our payment in lieu of taxes doesn't continue to go up with it. It's just, it's a fixed amount, and it's adjusted accordingly.
I guess it's going up faster in other areas, and the money has to come from somewhere, so.
Exactly. So in some areas, the valuation, or in some areas, they actually valuated a parcel not properly, and so when they reevaluated, they found out that property was worth more. And in Falmouth's case, this particular, let's say if it was oceanfront land and some of it was inlet land that was not the same value as the oceanfront land would be.
Okay.
So that's
Thank
the
you.
explanation for that.
Anyone else? Sam?
Just quickly, and Vinnie, you may recall this, but I think your predecessor, Therese Murray, was instrumental in actually giving payment in lieu of taxes to Falmouth. And it happened shortly after they did that Chapter 70 clawback to push more money into the gateway cities, basically saying the state's is responsible for educating children, and we need to essentially invested more in education where we're not getting the same achievement out of students. She was pretty instrumental in getting an increase in pilot to Falmouth to help us basically balance our books, and of course that continued on for some time. So, oftentimes I don't feel like we, in our communities like Falmouth, get as much of the tax monies that we send to the state as we really probably should be on a per capita basis. So,
and that's a fair assessment, and that's, regardless of Republican or Democrat, up there, that is always the battle that we have. It's much more about suburban and urban battles as opposed to partisan battles, just because of the simple fact that, in the cities, their argument is that we have all the problems and the challenges, and the reality is they have more legislators by the simple fact of their population sizes, and they see it as a challenge. And of course, we understand the challenges that we face outside of that. And if you look at in comparison what we would receive for assistance in Chapter 70 education funding or Chapter 90 funding, you'll get a sense of the disparity there, where the cities will get far more and we get less. It's a consistent battle. We try to do the best we can, and that's why you try to find the areas where you can to try to get what I call our fair share of the state revenues that we can. Thank you to that point.
Very grateful for the action and spreading the pain out a couple of years, and thanks for just keeping a watch on that kind of thing, and appreciate you attending the meeting. Have a great night.
And just a quick follow-up too is the EDIC had reached out to us. Again, this is a budget, so we're going through, and we're going to be starting conference on Thursday, but we're also able to get $80,000 for the Open Cape for the downtown businesses to hopefully be able to tap into the Open Cape system there. So that was
great announcement.
So that was pretty exciting as well there. So, but thank you for the opportunity to say a few words, and always appreciate you inviting me here.
Thanks for the help. Very much. Bye-bye. Next, we have on the agenda public comment, which is an opportunity.
Another announcement very quickly.
Oh, sure. Yep.
Just to announce, if you haven't seen it in the newspapers, it's been advertised, but the Volunteers of Public Schools has a Feast of Falmouth this Friday. It's at Mahoney's, and I think it's from 5 until 7. It's their major fundraiser to basically support programs for teachers to help augment the education that we provide to our children. So Feast of Falmouth this Friday, VIPS organization. Thank you.
Megan?
And then just to announce that there will be a Town of Falmouth public drinking water presentation Wednesday, June 6th. That's this Wednesday. The Woods Hole Oceanographic Sustainability Committee is sponsoring 2 special programs at Redfield Auditorium, which is on 45 Water Street in Woods Hole, from 5 to 6:30 p.m. All WHOI employees, students, postdocs, volunteers, as well as Falmouth staff, officials, committee members are invited to the presentation. Steve Rafferty will be giving the presentation on our public drinking water supply. An overview including our water sources, state-of-the-art filtration plant, and distribution system will be described. The presentation will be followed by a question and answer session. A second presentation on the same topic will be offered and open to the general public later that evening from 7 to 8:30. So I know there's some committee members here as well tonight. So if you're planning on attending, that would be 5 to 6:30. For everyone else, 7 to 8:30. And a raffle to tour the water plant, which is really exciting, will be held. It really is actually extremely exciting. Will be held at the end of each presentation, with each person in attendance given a chance to win one of 12 spaces on each of the tours. And the tours will take place the following week, Wednesday, June 13th, at 5:30 or 7 p.m. respectively. So.
Sam.
And one more.
Yeah.
The Rotary Club of Falmouth is actually hosting a pancake breakfast at the Marine, at the the Masonic Lodge here on Main Street. And it's, again, a fundraiser to support scholarships for students at the high school. So if anybody would like to come and eat as many pancakes as your stomach can hold, go to the Masonic Lodge on Saturday morning, and the Rotary will be happy to serve you.
Okay. And then there's, Julian, one more announcement, maybe the corridor meeting tomorrow. Do you want to?
Yes, and I know Ray Jack is with us this evening as well for several other things, but Ray can jump in anything that I missed, but 6 p.m. tomorrow evening, public meeting on the proposed Main Street reconstruction, water main replacement, and roadway reconstruction project in the Herman Room of the library, and that is the, I believe it's the 5 to 10% plan stage, and we welcome public comment in furtherance of that important project going forward that we've discussed at various times with the Planning Board and the Board of Selectmen as well.
Great, but that's a great opportunity for public outreach, and if you're
Absolutely.
interested, you'll see all the details. Any other announcements? Okay. We will now move on to public comment, which is an opportunity to speak for 2 minutes on any item not on the agenda. Mark?
Mark Finneran, Precinct 6. I actually just got this off my phone. I checked my messages. But I was asked to announce that to everyone in the public that the recycling portion of the town's waste management facility is closed until further notice, as the hauler who takes them away has no place to get rid of it. They're still taking recycling on curbside because it's contracted. The DPW's here. They might be able to fill in any blanks, but I just want everybody to know that they cannot bring any recycling to the waste management facility for the near future anyway.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks. Sir? Welcome.
Hi, I'm David Dow. I'm a resident of the Yearling Meadows development in East Falmouth. I actually wanted to share an announcement about the University of Rhode Island Steep Science Day, which is going to be held on Thursday from 10 to 4. And I have a flyer that you can read more about it, but they're going to have both the scientists and some of the graduate students that are involved in this program. And the purpose of this grant is to study the role of perfluorinated chemicals in our drinking water on the immune system in children. So I'm on the community outreach program for this event. Thanks.
Where is that?
The Barnesville Town Hall from 10 to 4.
Thank you. Thursday?
Thank you very much.
This is coming Thursday?
Yes.
Thank you.
Great. Anyone else? Public comment? Thank you very much for that. Okay, we'll move on to the summary of actions. We have an application for an agricultural liquor license for Cape Cod Winery, Falmouth Farmers Market, Marina Park on Thursdays, June 7, 2018 to October 11, 2018.
Move approval.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We next have an application for a special one-day liquor license for New Silver Beach Improvement Association's Courts, 6 West Street, North Falmouth, on Saturdays, July 14, 2018, August 4th, and September 1st. Is anyone here from the New Silver Beach Improvement Association? I'm seeing none. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next, we have under administrative orders, review approval of a continuation of the intermunicipal agreement, the IMA, for Upper Cape Regional Transfer Station. Mr. Suso, do you want to kick that off?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Public Works Director Ray Jack has a brief presentation, if it'd be the pleasure of the board. In a nutshell, the town's participation in the Upper Cape Regional Transfer Station through an intermunicipal agreement has been ongoing for well over a decade. That agreement, the current form of that agreement will be expiring at the end of this month, and the 4 communities involved have been asked to consider an extension of that. My understanding is the other 3 communities, that being Sandwich, Bourne, and Mashpee, have all agreed and signed on that extension, and it would be before the board this evening to consider doing so as well. And I turn it over to Ray for his for a brief description.
Can we do it in 8 minutes?
Thank you.
Pardon?
Can we do it in 8 minutes, because we have a hearing at 7:30?
8 minutes.
8 minutes? Believe it or not, it's only 6 slides.
There we go.
It'll be 8 minutes, yes.
Very good. Thank you.
So some of the key terms of the agreement, it's a relatively straightforward document. We've had an IMA in this context or something similar there too since 1987, back when we were going to CMAS for trash disposal. This particular agreement expires on June 30th of this year, so it's this month. The proposed extension is to 12/31 of 22, and has another possible extension on top of that, taking it out to 2026. Each town has only 1 vote, and that is only the towns. The base has a representative. There is one from Joint Base Cape Cod, but that is not a voting position. The costs and/or revenues, whatever they may be, are shared equally among the communities. And this particular agreement allows a third-party assignment for the site. Hence, you can have literally a user out there other than the towns themselves, which is what we presently have with Cavosa Corporation. The site happens to be an 18.8 acre site assigned to the transfer station itself, and that doesn't necessarily include any of the rail. That is the actual lot site that the facility is located on, so it's a substantial piece of real estate. The actual purpose of this agreement and its predecessor was the interim use of the facility in order to be able to preserve it for future uses, whatever they may be, for the Upper Cape towns. If the facility was abandoned for 2 years or more, the agreements go away and the facility reverts back to the base. So it was considered by all of the communities, including Falmouth at that time, that the best interests of all parties were served by trying to find an interim, active, beneficial use for the facility, just in order to keep it within our control and jurisdiction. For Falmouth, after the original agreement went away and we closed out our contract with CMAS, we currently have a landfill contract for waste disposal. That's 7 years remaining on that contract. We do have a possible extension on there, but that's based on what their airspace may be at that time. It's most likely that if anything were to happen to that agreement, meaning that it expired and or the landfill closed for whatever reason, our most likely disposal option would be back to CMAS, in which case we would have a need for transport with regard to the municipal solid waste. That was the purpose of the original transfer station, because it would transport waste by rail. So if there were no upper regional transfer station and or rail at that site, then all waste would have to move by truck, which means over the bridge. Higher transport costs just for us would be $250,000 alone, and that would just be for the trash portion of it. Last year, when we were discussing the Cavosa contract, at that time, I had provided this information for the board. This has to do with the rail to trail options that have been promulgated by the Cape Cod Commission. So these were the 3 options that were out there. To my knowledge, there is no change in the numbers or the options at this time. But the original option that they were looking at favorably, meaning the various bike organizations, was $9 million for the rail to trail, which means that the rails would be removed. The secondary line, which is about 6.5 miles long, that goes from North Falmouth up to the canal. Or rail with trail, and it would have at-grade crossings, would have been the next cheapest alternative at almost $14.5 million. And then the railway trail that would require new bridge crossings, meaning that they would have to expand the existing bridges in order to accommodate a trail that would go right alongside the existing rail. And that was the most expensive option, and I think that everyone pretty much threw that one out as being unattainable at $25 million. So under the present Cavosa contract, for a termination for that contract would have to be either for a cause or the result of a government action. And the government action would be anything that they would do to take away control of the facility. So they could literally divest themselves of that facility out there. And if they did, then effectively we would have no contract with the federal facility in order to maintain the Upper Cape Transfer Station. If the rail spur were eliminated, that's not an immediate cause for termination of the contract, but it would likely require renegotiation with Cavosa on what the impacts would be, and that may lead to a mutual termination. But of and by itself, he would still be able to continue business, except that the material would move by truck, leaving the facility. So the recommendations would be to renew the IMA. The interim use will preserve future options for the Upper Cape communities. This IMA is independent of rail use or anything else. There's nothing in the document about the rail use, so it's not constrained in any way. There are other agreements that we have that have issues to do with the rail, such as the consent agreement for the facility that we have with the base itself. The rail is actually controlled by MassDOT, but it is owned by the military, so it's under the control presently of the 102nd Fighter Wing up on the base. Rail reduces truck traffic, as I explained earlier. Having a rail with trail would preserve future options for the rail service or rail option for that transfer station, whether it be for our use or any other type of commercial use. And I think one important aspect of this agreement is that any town is eligible to withdraw at any time. All they have to do is give a one-year notice, a fiscal year notice, their intent to withdraw, and any monies that are owed or revenues that are due would be paid at that time, and the town is capable of withdrawing. Whether or not Falmouth was a participant in this particular agreement, the agreement would continue in force because 3 other towns have already approved it, so it just means that Falmouth would be out of the mix, and Falmouth would no longer then have any voice with regard to control of the facility.
And Ray, the town also earns revenues annually from this agreement, correct?
Yes, and it escalates for each of the 5 years under Cavosa's contract. It's not a substantial amount, but it's significant enough. I know for the second year, it's $19,500 plus $10,000 and change, and that equals about $30,000 on the second year of the contract, and it escalates to a range of $30,000 to $40,000 depending on what the tonnage is. And that is just Falmouth's share. Each town gets an equivalent amount.
Mr. Jack, I'm mindful of the time. We have a hearing at 7:30. Would the board need some discussion on this? Should we just...
I'm okay.
Yeah,
I would move that
Just
we
make one
approve
quick
it.
comment.
Okay.
I'm glad that we still have this option, because last month, the Bourne demolition disposal was closed because they had a funding issue, and so it was great to have this option, and I think we should support it, keep it going.
Is that a motion?
Yes, I make a motion.
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I never seem to have my hearing notices in the pack.
I'm not sure. I didn't see one of those.
Julian, do you have a hearing notice?
I don't have it. Let's see.
Yay. Doug, always.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is a public hearing with respect to beach rules and regulations. The notice states as follows: as provided under Section 65-12 of the Code of Falmouth, a public hearing will be held in the Selectmen's Meeting Room, Falmouth Town Hall, on Monday, June 4 at 7:30 p.m. to establish and promulgate rules, regulations, and orders for the regulation of conduct and activities at public beaches and parks, and determine penalties for violations thereof after public hearing and publication. This was published in the Falmouth Enterprise on Friday, May 25th, 2018. Thank you. Presentations, we have Mr. Magato. Would you like to start? Or Mr. Suso, do you want to tee it up?
I'll be happy to make a few comments, Madam
Sure.
Chair.
Thank you.
Selectmen have a copy, an initial copy was presented to you 2 weeks ago, as the board is aware, and a presentation was made at that time. We have, with the assistance of Mr. McGardo and the Beach Committee, and also Peter Johnson-Staub, thank you. We have some very minor grammatical updates to the proposed regulations, and they're fundamentally identical to what the board had received and had a presentation on at your last meeting. So the thought would be, Madam Chair, if you and the members of the board would so determine that you might want to go directly to the public comment portion. We had received a couple of email issues which have been forwarded to the board as well.
Thank you. Is there anyone here who would like to speak in favor of these rules? Okay, seeing none, is there anyone here who would like to speak against these rules? Paula, do you want to? And I want to thank you for really apprising us of the procedure, so appreciate your contribution to that.
Oh, thank you very much. And so we're partially on one side and partially on another. We have some comments. I have 3.5 minutes. We can split it between 2 board members if you like, or I could just make the presentation.
You can split it.
Okay. So I'm Paula.
Whatever you prefer, put it that way.
All right. It would be easier if I just do the whole thing.
Sure.
All right. So I'm Paula Lichter, and I'm here tonight as Vice President of the Falmouth Heights-Mara Vista Neighborhood Association to speak on behalf of our board and Board of Directors and members. We have 5 concerns that we would ask you to address, and we needed to have some consensus after we saw the list. So that's why we're speaking tonight. So the first one, number 1, is lifeguards' use of their discretion regarding ball playing, kite flying, and beach games. And there are really 3 issues here. First, ball playing with hard balls and kite flying can be dangerous. So we ask that during beach hours you prohibit kite flying and hard balls of any kind. Second, we think there are not enough lifeguards at some beaches to effectively guard both the water and the sand while maintaining a safe environment. At the April Beach Committee meeting, someone suggested hiring an extra lifeguard to supervise just the beach, not the water. We have been requesting a beach monitor for the past 4 years, and this extra lifeguard assigned to the busiest beaches would effectively act as a beach monitor. Third, we request that you create a monitoring system with a clear methodology to track the effectiveness of beach rules. Mr. Morgado has stated that 40 incidences of inappropriate ball playing at the Heights Beach last year were dealt with successfully by the lifeguards, which is a good thing, but only 40 during a 10-week season really can't be all there was. So we request that you ask the beach department to report to you monthly at a scheduled selectmen's meeting a summary of daily tallies of all beachgoers' complaints to the lifeguards and their interventions, and that would provide valuable information for decision-making in future years. Tent placement. The Beach Committee is recommending that tents not obstruct the lifeguard's view or path to the water. Obviously, we agree with that, but we also ask that this be amended to any canopy tents up to 10 feet by 10 feet, there are some that are 6 by 6, not obstructing the view or path to the water of any beachgoer, and that they be restricted to the rear of the beach, not just anywhere behind the lifeguards' chairs. Third, signage. The current signs are too few, too small, and often covered up. We support the beach department's suggestion to print the rules and hand them out with each sticker at the time of sale. However, the majority of beachgoers, at least in our neighborhoods, do not buy stickers, including local homeowners and patrons of hotels, motels, B&Bs, Airbnbs, and other rentals. And how will they be informed? 4, dogs on the beach after hours. Falmouth has a leash law all year, and dogs are prohibited from beaches between May 1st and October 1st. Dogs like to play in the water, so many owners let their dogs roam off leash as soon as the lifeguards leave the beach. Animal control is currently open until only 4 o'clock. However, one animal control officer may change her hours until 6 o'clock. We have requested that between 4 o'clock and 6 o'clock, she intermittently visit various beaches which have the most complaints to enforce the town law. Yes, people can, of course, call the police, but really the police are usually much too busy with more serious matters. So after-hours enforcement of this town law is really non-existent and should be addressed. And lastly, public manners. We request the prohibition of music which can be heard over 15 feet away from its source. Everyone has access to earbuds, and the beach really doesn't need to be a venue for sound systems, nor for music, which often has lyrics disrespectful of women and police officers, et cetera, which have been more common on our beaches. So thank you for your time and consideration, and may I approach to give this to you for your record? Okay.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor of the beach rules that have been presented?
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak, thank you, Paula, against the beach rules that have been presented? Dan?
Well, Dan Scherer, I'm a member of the Beach Committee. And I'm not speaking for the Beach Committee, I'm speaking for myself, and I told them I was going to come up here and speak for tonight on this. And that's tents. I'm all for the tents, I think they're great, but 10 by 10 will hold 4 chairs and a queen-size bed. We don't need it. Ocean State Job Lot has some very nice canopy tents for 5 by 7 and smaller, and the rest of the rules, I cover Chappaqua Beach almost every day for the Beach Committee and so forth. We have very, very few complaints, if any. I don't think we've had one or that anybody has said anything at a Beach Committee meeting on. So the rest of the rules, I think, are fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. Mr. Magato, would you like to speak to some of the comments that have come up?
You have to sort of remind me a little bit about what you want to hear.
Sure.
I can give you a copy of
Go ahead, Ed.
Let me just, I can run down my notes, and if anyone else wants to help out, that would be great. The first one was essentially the discretion with respect to hard balls, kite flying, those kinds of things.
Anytime anybody throws anything, if it puts people in danger or jeopardizes their safety, we're going to stop it. It doesn't matter if it's a lacrosse ball, a beach ball, a softball, a baseball. If the person can't throw correctly, if a person can't catch correctly, and if it's too close to people, we're shutting it down.
Kite flying.
We don't fly kites on a beach full of people. That's just not going to happen. In fact, at the Heights, we have Kite Hill, which is a far better place to fly kites than the beach. And we have the ballpark behind it. So as far as kite flying, it's said there because sometimes people like to fly kites in May, first part of June, maybe September, October. But we're very judicious about where kites are flown and how close to people they are. I'm more concerned about drones than I am kites.
The size of tents, the thinking behind 10 feet, up to 10 feet, being allowed.
We looked at other towns, and there was only 1 or 2 towns that actually described a length and width. Everybody else just said tents are fine. So we jumped on a bandwagon with the recommendation for a 10 by 10. But that's up to you people.
Sam?
On that, what about the location? Because I think some of the concerns about blocking views, but designating an area in the back of the beach, if you will, away from the surf.
We would suggest that anyway, because at smaller beaches, wherever you put that tent, it is going to block the path or line of sight. We also want to make sure at the Heights Beach particularly, where the handicap parking is right in the middle of the parking lot, that those tents do not block people who want to just sit in the handicap spot and watch the water. So they would be asked to move left or right away from that area.
Megan?
But shouldn't that guidance be in your rules?
We chose not to write down every single discretionary rule there. We thought better of teaching our guards to make better decisions through practice. I believe that good decision-making can be taught as an old school teacher.
And just to that issue, that's a tough one for me because I think some people use tents because they just prefer to have the shade. Some folks use tents because they need it. I worked for many years with folks who were in wheelchairs when they're going to the beach. You know, they don't have the same mobility that we might have to kind of move, you know, an umbrella with the sun and things like that. And so if someone shows up to the beach a little bit late, where those spots are taken in the back, or it's hard to navigate given whatever issues you have, to have a hard and fast rule, you know, I think that would concern me a little bit, that we might, you know, just not really accommodate some folks for whatever needs they might have in terms of using the tents. The size, I don't have a problem with, you know, a smaller size tent, as Dan was suggesting. I'm sure a 6x6 provides a good amount of shade for anyone, but I like the idea of having their, you know, the preference is, as noted, that, you know, folks with tents are sort of towards the back to not block anybody, but to make it a hard and fast rule, I think is a little bit tough, because there's some, you know, everybody's different who comes to the beach and has different levels of need and ability. So I think it should be left to the folks who are there to make that determination.
Doug.
And one comment I'd make on you saying it's our decision. I actually want it to be the Beach Committee's decision, because the Beach Committee has been appointed to make these recommendations, and I think the honor we can show to our committees is if advice comes from our advisory committees, that we go along with your advice. You've spent all winter hearing comments, inviting people to come to your meetings, and so I would really much rather go with your recommendations, see how it works based on these recommendations, than for us to try to, in 10 minutes, in a quick meeting, change what you've come up with. I'd say you've come up with an idea. I'd much rather support what you're saying, and then you gather information over the summer and say, well, maybe the 10 by 10 was too big, and next year we make it 6 by 6. So I'd much rather go.
Well, we're certainly open to suggestions for change, maybe at the same time next year.
Yeah.
My point was that the Beach Committee, at 3 separate votes, supports that recommendation and all those recommendations, because that's what we believe in. Through concerned research throughout the Cape and a couple of towns off Cape, that's what we came up with. It's not a super inclusive list, but we didn't choose to do that. Some towns do. Some towns have 25, 35 things that they want you to do, and most of that begins with no. We honestly felt that we could try to strike a balance between people's rights, people's safety, and the privilege of having fun at Falmouth beaches, besides just getting a suntan and getting wet. We think we can do more. I believe I can do more with your beaches. I want to try.
The one comment I would love to have in at some point is just to remind people that anything they do should be respectful of other people in the area. And that should be the one rule, is be aware that you are surrounded by other people. And if what you're doing can diminish their fun, then they should not be doing it.
Certainly that's a good message for a local community, but maybe that needs to be a national message too.
Yeah, people come here from lots of different cultures.
Yes, they do.
So one question I have for you, I hadn't paid attention to this before, but at the start it says beach hours are defined as hours between when beaches are supervised from 9 to 5. And it kind of insinuates that that's only the time when the rules will be enforced. But would you be opposed to this saying rules are in place at all hours?
My question would be, who would enforce them?
Not that it would be enforced, but just to let people know that these are the beach rules. Just because a lifeguard's not here, you should still follow the rules.
I support that.
Okay.
Quite frankly, there's lots of places that make a 180-degree turn after 5 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
And they become a problem. I'm getting lots and lots of complaints, more so about alcohol and dogs after 5 o'clock than I've ever heard before.
Well, I think that's an important point, but in terms of the responsibility, I think the town manager is going to be staffing, you know, the dog issue as he sees fit based upon his management and the complaints. And then if the after-hours behavior becomes an issue, that could be a police matter. So there is a way to cover that. Megan?
I just wanted to speak sort of to the issue raised about kind of the staffing component of it. I mean, is your feeling, I'm sure there's no department that's ever going to say we couldn't use more staff. I mean, every department could use more staff. But just in terms of, you know, your feel after doing this for so long, and I know it's hard to get staff for these positions because it's seasonal. It's
We're actually abundant with applications.
Oh, this is good. So, I mean, are you feeling that you need any more staff, or do you feel like the rules are, I guess I'm just asking the question because I see it comes up in a couple of different points about the idea of enforcement of these rules or supervision around these rules takes eyes. We've always talked about the primary role of the lifeguard is to be looking forward, to watch for safety, not looking at all of the peripherals. So is your feeling that there's a need for additional staff at any of the beaches? Or
I have a plan. I'd be happy to share it with the board. I've hired 2 extra parking attendants, and one will be at the Heights and one will be at Old Silver. When the parking lot is full, the additional parking attendant would then put their eyes on the sand and the beach. If an issue comes up that a lifeguard doesn't respond to, we will notify the lifeguard to please review the issue to the left or right and do the best that they think is appropriate at the time. We're going to do that. I want to try that. It's another one of my experiments. I like to try things. My mother said that nothing ventured, nothing gained. And so I'm going to give it a whirl and see if it works.
Especially since those parking lots probably fill by like 9:15. So you're going to have an extra set of eyes after 9:15.
The resident side at Old Silver is usually all full by 9:20.
Yeah.
Well, and I think we've talked about all along, the Board of Selectmen will be getting interim reports based upon how these rules have gone. We have committee reports all the time as the committees are available and able to make the reports, and certainly new beach rules will be something that we will be interested in seeing how they're working, things that might need to be tweaked or not. Another, just to kind of cover the bases here, the music issue and then signage, I think, are the things I just want to hit to that we might not.
Signage is an interesting issue. We can put a ton more signs up if you think that's the appropriate thing to do. I think it's kind of detracts away from the beauty of the environment, but people do have to know what they can and can't do. That's on the PA sheds as anybody drives into a parking lot. But if you walk on, you might not see it. But it's on the back of every lifeguard chair. And so I've held off making any changes to signage until the board made a decision, so I wouldn't waste any money on adding something or buying something that wasn't correct. Again, I'm in favor of maybe an article in the paper. I'm happy to sit down with a reporter and talk about those kinds of things, about beach behavior, beach etiquette, noise, respecting people's privacy, if not their space, that kind of thing. Just to get it to the public eye. But I don't know about extra signs. Once upon a time, I'll give you a once upon a time story. Once upon a time, back in the 60s, the beach regulation signs were on a 4 by 8 sheet of plywood. 2 of them, side by each, in big 4-inch letters. And people were insulted by the signs because they couldn't see the water. So it was a kind of a strange thing. So that sign became small enough to fit on the back of a chair, so we could duplicate it 4, 5, 6, 7 times at a beach.
Appreciate that. Also, your long history and judgment.
Yeah, I've been around a
while.
Doug?
I would just say that if there's no opposition, I would add a 4th line and say, after it says the time that the lifeguards are on duty and the time that the bathhouses are open, say regulations are in effect at all times. I don't think it hurts anything.
So that would be in the second.
I would say the 4th line. 1, 2, 3. It would be line 5.
I might have a different order than you do, Doug.
Okay, well.
Okay.
My
9 to 5 is my number 2. Beach hours are defined as hours when beaches are supervised, 9 to 5.
Okay, and then, we could put it right there, too. I mean, anywhere in that top area, I was thinking after when you say what the beach hours are and the parking lot.
Well, we can say that the beach rules and regulations are in effect at all times.
Yeah.
We can add that to number 2.
That's a good
Sure.
one.
Hush, 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 hush.
Dan, did you have another comment, question?
Yeah,
At the podium?
They're going to fire me.
Thank you, Mr. Legato.
After hours at the beach, a lot of people like to at night fish. They like to go out on a paddle board, which we have very few areas we can do it. So at 6, 7 o'clock at night, I mean, I don't see why you have to obey all the rules and close the beaches down completely. I mean, there are other sports done on beaches than swimming. And, Windward, I talk about Chappaquiddick Beach, it's small. There's not much room. What the kiteboarders have probably lost their whole space that they've had before because the nasty guy sold the land. And
Thank you, nasty guy. Megan, do you want to comment?
I was just going to say, and I think Dan raises a really good point, but I think that's covered, and I know you don't have this right in front of you right now, Dan, even though you've been part of crafting it, but it does note that watercraft fishing, scuba diving are not permitted in the swim areas during beach hours. So I think that, that's covered, that then you can do fishing and things like that in the off hours.
Yes. We also have had since, I think Mrs. Mitchell passed it in 86. We have 2 spaces on one west side beach and one south side beach where watercraft can be launched during the day, during bathing hours, but outside of the bathing area. One is at Surf Drive to the far west end, and one is at Chappaquiddick to the north end. So there is access for these crafts, but they can't unload and rig out in the parking lot, just in case something blows and hits somebody's car. We don't want to have a lawsuit to the town for liability.
Thank you. Very quick. Sure, come right up.
We all keep forgetting about phone numbers. We have them on our website, but they're not on the beach rules and they're not on any of the signs. Could they be added? I know that Mr. Magardo gave us his phone number, and then the Surf Drive Beach House phone number, maybe the police phone number. Those 3 numbers would be great to be on all the signs and printed on the beach rules.
Good comment. Is there anyone else who wants to speak in favor of the beach rules as proposed? Is there anyone who wants to speak against? Ms. Harlow-Hawks?
I didn't have any intention to speak Maureen Harlow-Hawks, but she made a good point, but maybe add animal control on the number, because the dogs are one of the bigger problems.
Thank you.
I would move we close the hearing.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
And Doug?
The one thing to comment about the phone numbers is that's not a vote we're making in the regulations. Our vote tonight is just on the hearing on approving these regulations that have been before us. And I'm okay with Doug Brown's suggestion of adding the regulations that are in effect all the time, particularly because the beach hours defines that the fishing and the boarding can be done outside beach hours.
Yep.
Is that your motion?
I would move approval of the beach regulations as been proposed with the amendment made by Mr. Brown.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Magatto. Pardon?
Special events.
Thank you. Next, we have, under special events, the Wacoit Congregational Church Summer Bazaar, one way on Parsons Lane, and there was a correction here.
The bazaar is only those 2 days.
Okay, so it's Friday, July 13, and Saturday, July 14. Nell, welcome.
Thank you.
What's this about?
Well, I'm Reverend Nell Fields, the minister at the Wacoit Congregational Church. Every summer we have a 2-day bazaar. For the past couple of years, we have been filling out the paperwork for a special permit. I don't know if this is something that we did on our own or if somebody called us and said, you need this paperwork. I read the policy behind that paperwork, and I'm wondering if we really need to fill that out. From my reading, I don't think that we need to, and then it was suggested that I bring it before this highly esteemed board.
That board's coming later in the night. That's not.
Well, we do have town council here. While he's coming up to answer the question, I will say it's a great opportunity for PR.
I love it. That's
Explain
what,
to people that it will be one way, so when they see the horses, not the kind we were talking about
Yeah.
earlier, but
Saw horses.
the construction horses, they'll know why that is there.
So, and let me explain, we actually did that. We didn't, the police didn't tell us to do that. It's something that we did, and then we called the police and said, hey, there's just a tiny portion of Parsons Lane that we're making one-way. We provide all the traffic control. We do get a detail for 28 in case people want to cross the road. But all of the event itself is held on church property, not town property.
I think especially where it affects the road, again, waiting for town council to come up and nod at me. Frank, if you would just come up and make sure, if you have a disagreement, let us know. But I think that you're kind of covering your bases, and really the concern might be a waiver of the fee, which we can also address coming up. Frank, what's your view? Do they really need a permit since it's mostly on church property?
I'm sorry, but I wasn't prepared for this because I didn't know you were going to talk about it. But are you talking about closing the road?
They make it a one-way. They make Parson Lane a one-way.
You have the authority to do that without a permit. I believe there's a bylaw that gives you that authority. Didn't we do that a few years ago?
But
That needs to come to the board.
Event,
yes. Huh?
For an event, it would be a certain time that it would be.
The board is the only one with the authority.
The board is the only one with the authority to do
To grant that.
If there's an event and you deem it worthy of closing a road or making it one way, you have the authority to do it and set the parameters.
So the proper request would be a request to make the road one way, not a permit for the event?
Right.
That's your question?
Yes.
In which case, there's no fee for the event permit.
It's just within your
I'm very happy.
I think you've solved the whole issue here. Is there any
Thank you,
question from the board or
I
any?
move that we allow the road to be one-way for those 2 days,
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
and that we ignore the permit request.
Wonderful. So is there paperwork that we fill out every year for that?
You would ask to be on our agenda.
Got it.
Every year ahead of time.
Correct.
Just so that we would go through this process, but you don't have to fill out paperwork for it.
Wonderful, thank you. It starts at 8 a.m. and ends at 4. If you haven't been, it's an awesome event. Okay,
Great, thank you very much. Next, we have the Woods Hole 4th of July Parade, Water Street, Woods Hole, MBL, Wednesday, July 4th, 2018. Is there anyone here for that event? Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Next, we have under business, a presentation and to vote policy on the flow neutral bylaw. Mr. Suso.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. You recall that the board convened a public hearing on a development request that would necessitate a variance on wastewater at your last meeting, and the board had asked that I work with members, town council and members of staff in developing some guidelines. You have a copy of a summary of discussion from Town Council Frank Duffy, and I'll defer to Frank to walk through that briefly. You also have a copy of a suggested draft-only set of consideration items for potential waivers, and of course the flow neutral bylaw as well, but I think we'll kick it off with Frank if we may.
And I think we all also have some correspondence, for example, Noreen Byrne on this in the packet or in your mail. Mr. Duffy.
Frank Duffy, Town Council. Well, as Mr. Suso has explained to you, he put together a group that has met 3 or 4 times in the last 2 weeks to try and come up with some help for you folks, and I will tell you right off the bat, it's been difficult. And the last meeting was at 10 o'clock this morning, and it lasted until about noon. And then I put together this summary for discussion, which probably came off the press at around 3 o'clock, and it was distributed to you later, but just to go through it. The flow neutral bylaw was submitted to town meeting in 2013 by the Nutrient Management Committee, and it was to qualify for a 0% SRF loan to expand the sewer system. Now, the existing sewer bylaw provides that the construction of a septic system in an area that is sewered is prohibited. All properties abutting a street in which there is a sewer are required to connect to the sewer within 90 days of an official notice. So that to me means, and it's confirmed by Ray, Jack, and Amy, by the way, that there's no option to require a septic system for a construction or new development in a sewer service area. The flow neutral bylaw itself has a statement of purpose, and it's in section 51, chapter 180, section 51, and there are 4 purposes of the bylaw. The first is to comply with the terms and conditions of the discharge permit, and that's the discharge permit for the wastewater treatment plant, which is currently somewhere in the magnitude of about 700,000 gallons a day. Even though the treatment plant's capacity is much more, we can only discharge so much, and it's less. Another purpose is to manage present and future wastewater flows. A third purpose is to meet present and future water quality standards. And the final purpose is a rather broadly described one, to support broad community planning objectives. Now, the application before you is for a new non-residential development in a sewer service area. And anybody building new non-residential development may connect to the sewer by right with a wastewater flow of up to 110 gallons per day for every 10,000 square feet of lot area. Because the proposal that's before you exceeds that, the connection to the sewer requires a variance from you acting as the variance granting authority. So what is the variance about? Well, under Chapter 180, Section 56, again of the Code of Falmouth, the Board of Selectmen may grant the variance. And there are 2 conditions or preconditions. First, there is sufficient capacity at the wastewater treatment facility as determined by the wastewater superintendent. That is a determination that has been made, and it was answered affirmatively. There is sufficient capacity. Secondly, the Board of Health must certify to you that that an adequate septic system can be sited on the parcel. The Board of Health has in fact done this calculation and determined that an adequate septic system could be sited on the parcel, although it can't be sited on the parcel. Now, with those 2 preconditions having been met, the Board of Selectmen then has the authority to grant the waiver, and I'm going to quote from the language of the bylaw. The Board of Selectmen may, at its sole and absolute discretion, issue a variance that in its judgment could be granted without substantially derogating from the intent and purpose of this bylaw. In my memorandum, I've highlighted in bold 2 terms in that bylaw. One is sole and absolute discretion, and the second one is substantially derogating. Probably taking the easiest one first, substantially derogating from the intent and purpose of the bylaw. It is not defined in the bylaw what that means. But to me, it suggests that your inquiry, anyways, and the facts that you consider shouldn't vary too far from the intent and purpose of the bylaw, which is why I just put in the memorandum the 4 purposes of the bylaw. The other one is the use of the phrase sole and absolute discretion, and I want to bring this to the attention of the board because I think this should be read with some caution. Very rarely are regulatory boards given absolute discretion. In almost every instance that I can think of, perhaps in every instance that there is really, a discretionary decision of a regulatory board is subject to review, and it can be reviewed in court. In this particular situation, it would be reviewed in Barnstable Superior Court under what we call a petition for certiorari. And when a Superior Court handles a matter in this regard, it looks for a couple of things. First, the question is, did the board act within the parameters of its authority? And certainly you're granted the authority to issue waivers, so that's probably been taken care of. But the second important thing I want to emphasize is that a decision to pass muster and certiorari must be supported by evidence in the record. And I'll address that a little bit later. And in the final analysis, if the court finds that the board acted within its authority and its decision is supported in the record and is not arbitrary and capricious, you can be affirmed. But if it's not supported in the record or it's arbitrary and capricious, despite the fact you have sole and absolute discretion, you may find out that you don't. Another point I just would like to make, that any property within a sewer service area is usually assessed a betterment. So almost anybody coming to you for a variance is going to expect that they'll be able to use the sewer because they're paying a betterment whether they're connected to it or not. So you have a couple of resources to help you here. You have the wastewater superintendent and the director of public works who can give you information on any application with respect to conditions of the discharge permit, problems with wastewater flow management, and water quality standards. And I would suggest that when they do so, it be in writing and probably included in the record to support your decision. You also have the planning board, which can help you with the assistance or assist you in determining what are the greater community's planning objectives that must be considered when you're enforcing this bylaw, such as the local comprehensive plan or other planning initiatives. And again, I would suggest that it be in writing from the board and in the record. Now, the town manager, as I mentioned, put together a team to look at this and to try and present to you the recommendation which we're going to give you. Consisted of himself, the assistant town manager, myself, Scott McCann, the health agent, Tom Bott, the planner, wastewater superintendent, Amy Lowell, and Ray Jack. We had a lot of difficulty because there seems like we had difficulty identifying many communities that have gone down this road and tried to enforce a waiver provision. We did find one, and it's Provincetown. Now, Provincetown has sewer regulations. They have also, I think, a water and sewer commission, which we don't have, but you serve that function in Falmouth, which provides that during periods of limited capacity at the wastewater treatment plant, they can limit connections and use of the sewer. So they have set forth some priority categories. First priority that they set is they would grant waivers to promote the public health. If a connection is necessary, or an immediate connection is necessary for the protection of public health, then they are entitled to a waiver, and that would be their first priority. We are aware that Provincetown is a different community than Falmouth because of their proximity to the water, because of the closeness of the buildings, the lack of actual space to build septic systems. Public health might be a bigger concern in Provincetown than it is likely to be in Falmouth, but it's something that you should consider and not dismiss because it's a little different situation. The second priority that is assessed or asserted is economic development. And in this particular case, it is our suggestion that when you are considering economic development, you consider year-round economic development rather than seasonal development. And you can certainly ask a developer who comes before you to document and justify the economic development by providing you with data on projected employment, revenue generated, taxes paid, and various other matters that you think are important to make this decision. The third priority category is affordable housing. And this one is particularly problematic for a couple of reasons. Now, Provincetown suggests that they will give priority only to affordable housing where 50% of the units are in fact affordable. However, we know that under Chapter 40B, our Zoning Board of Appeals can approve of a project that where the affordable units comprise only 25%. I just point this out so you can think about it, not necessarily make a recommendation that you do one or the other. That's probably for you folks to decide. But it's dichotomy that's not easily addressed. Also, under Chapter 40B, the Board of Selectmen might not sit as the authority granting a waiver under the flow neutral bylaw, because in 40B, the Zoning Board of Appeals is the comprehensive permit granting authority, so they overtake you and they perform this function. So I would suggest that one of the things the Board of Selectmen might want to do if one of your priorities is to promote affordable housing is to see that sufficient capacity is reserved, so if the Board of Appeals wants to grant the waiver, they will have the capacity to use. You probably will not sit granting a waiver on a discrete project that comes before you, but this is a project that you will be addressing only in the global or grand scheme of things. The fourth priority that they identified is municipal use, and then all other categories of uses as they may come forward before you. Now, this is, again, I mentioned to you, this requires that the board keep up to date on the various issues, plant capacity, the projected applications that and connections by right, you're actually, and I sympathize with you in a way because you're dealing with a moving target, and it's a very difficult one. Mr. Suso has some suggested priorities, and we have here, I understand, also Amy Ray and Tom Bott to offer some suggestions. So I hope this is enough to get you started thinking about this. We found it not very easy to put this together. It only took me about 10 minutes, but believe me, it took us hours to try and get this done.
Well, I appreciate you being there to answer some questions. For example, what is the developer's option if the board does not grant?
Well, if they don't grant it, the developer can come back with a different project, perhaps scale down.
And then what is the purpose in the statute for having the Board of Health certify that a treatment system could be sited on the parcel?
That's to prevent you from using the sewer to enhance growth. In other words, you're limiting yourself to the limitations of a septic system, except that instead of having the septic system, you're going into the sewer. But it's not to allow you to suddenly throw a 3-story building up where you could only put a 2 before.
And you point out kind of the quagmire here, because under Chapter 180, Section 51 at SEC, it states that the purpose is to comply with the terms and conditions of the discharge permit. And as our water superintendent mentioned earlier during the hearing, in fact, we're kind of up against it.
You are up against it, and as it was expressed at the last meeting, I think perhaps by Amy, there's an 80% rule that when you get to that 80% of known capacity, you have to make a report to DEP to start planning the next phase. All of which is very difficult because we just spent $49 million upgrading the sewer system, the treatment plant, and everything that went along with it, and those loans are just on the books, and we're probably not inclined to spend a lot more money right now. So.
And that's the moving target aspect.
Yeah,
just one more thing.
Part of it.
I noticed not suggested here would be kind of the ordinary citizens who might be just outside the sewer area that's already designated, but that might want to connect. Where would they fall in the priority to your recommendation?
Well, it might not be they may be able to connect as of right, because a typical citizen, for example, of a single-family house and so forth, is probably going to be able to connect by right based upon the flow. But there's also another limitation, and I'm trying to remember exactly what it is, but you can connect only if you're within 100 feet of a sewer. After that, you can say no just on the basis of distance alone.
But we also don't have a policy. Perhaps the water superintendent is developing a policy with respect to the requests that we've gotten over the past several months.
Those requests are people that are outside the sewer service area.
Exactly.
This one's in the service area.
This is in the sewer service area.
But the flow is so high, that's the reason they need the waiver.
We've had a number of requests for people just outside, particularly a house that might be one street away, they want to connect, and the way the bylaw has been structured, the answer is no.
Doug?
And this is primarily was designed in thinking about the residential areas, with not as much thought given to the commercial areas, so that's why it's kind of a new twist for us. The other thing is, when you're planning these sewer areas, I guess I had asked this question previously, why don't we connect further down the peninsulas? You know, the thought was during the planning process that these end of peninsulas flush out into the vineyard. They're not really impacting the estuaries, so it's not really needed. But when I brought up the fact that with sea level rise and coastal sea level change, these septics are going to be getting flooded and it's going to be a health hazard, I said, for that reason, I think we maybe should extend the sewer area. And the answer I got at the Water Quality Management Committee was that that's really not an option, because the state won't authorize those areas to be connected, because they're thinking long-term and they don't want to stick infrastructure in places that are not appropriate.
That are impacted by sea level rise.
So some of those controls come into play as well.
Megan?
I guess I think and this is really helpful, so huge thanks to all the folks. I know there's a number of individuals who helped work on this. We definitely have a lot more information in front of us than we did the last time we talked about this issue. But I guess, my larger concern is, from the report that we heard from Amy Lowell, is, take this particular proposed project out of the mix. We're still already pretty close to this 80%. I mean, I know the way Amy figured it in was being conservative in the sense of taking everything that's kind of theoretically on the table that people kind of know is in the works. But, we're going to grow no matter what. If this project doesn't happen, presumably something else will go there. If it's something that even fits in with these priorities, that still impacts our 80%. I mean, there's two separate issues. There's the fact that we're going to have to address, we're going to hit that percent at some point, probably within a window of a certain number of years, and we're going to have to come up with our next plan, regardless of what this particular waiver is before us, but at some point in time, something will be built on that site, presumably, and if it's something like a 40B, as you're noting, we have limited control over that. So I guess my bigger concern is a larger question around kind of where is our planning, and I know we're getting there for 2019, where the planning and the thinking is at about how to address this in the long term. Because we want growth, we want more folks to hook up to the sewer system, to be able to do that. And so the bigger issue is what happens with, that discharge, that permit limit for the discharge, and how do we address that?
We're literally running from the tide. It's
Yes.
still coming.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, could
Sure.
Ray Jack comment on,
Mr.
to help
Jack,
answer
sure.
some of the questions that have been raised?
Just
Thank
a couple quick points to ponder, thank you. With regard to sewer connections outside of the sewer service area, we do not have the authority to approve them. That requires what's known as a notice of project change. We have an approved comprehensive wastewater management plan filed with the state, where we have fully delineated our sewer service areas. There are site-specific geographic areas that are known. Anything outside of that requires that we seek a modification from the state, whether it's 1 or 50. So we do plan for that for the future, even for some of the existing sewer service areas. And as part of that planning process comes the other point that you make, which is the 80%. In the old days, a wastewater plan was generally a 20-year planning horizon document. Today, it seems to be much less, and that the state is not inclined to give a town that long of a horizon with regard to actual capacity when they're trying to constrain what that capacity is going to be. So with our wastewater planning effort, we are required now, under the existing plan that we have, to resubmit to the state by December of next year. The new plan, which would be a comprehensive wastewater plan, with a different term applied to it, targeted watershed management plans and what have you. There are a number of other areas that we have to identify within the town to modify that document, and as part of that, we will be addressing the 80%. So we will be looking specifically at areas that are either contiguous right now to the existing sewer service area and or new areas that we may create, and try to determine what those flows would be and incorporate that into that document in order to get approval for our wastewater discharge.
On that
Now-
point, before you go on, so has the water superintendent estimated that number in her capacity numbers? Because you said it's not included because it's outside, but then we plan to include it.
And that will be part of that next year effort.
Is it part of the numbers that we were presented? No.
Well, Amy's here, so maybe she
No,
can
that's-
just tell us what number she included.
They should be the existing permit numbers that you're dealing with right now. And then along those lines, though, as we move toward that, the other issue is going to be a discharge site. The plant has capacity. It's built for 1.2 million gallons a day. It's not an issue of capacity at the plant. It's an issue of discharge capacity. So anytime we talk about that capacity, it's what we actually have remaining within our discharge permit. So the plan that I'm telling you that next year we're going to modifying will be requesting an increase in a permit allocation for whatever those future flows are going to be. And yes, we will try to plan them out over a fairly long horizon, because that's the responsible thing for any community to do, is to try to anticipate that. So you don't have to agonize over this too much, only in the interim, if you will. So the
Very
next
helpful.
couple of years will be.
Doug?
I know we're really supposed to be talking about the bylaw as opposed to the specific project, but in that site, we have assessed them a betterment, are already calculating, I can't remember what the initials are, the LSU, no.
EDUs.
SEUs.
Or SEUs.
SEUs, sewer equivalent units.
How many equivalent units did we assess for those two parcels? Was it a residential?
Well, at that point in time, well, let me see, for those particular parcels, they were under the original betterment that was done. So they had already been assessed and/or paid, but the hotel was already gone. So the question even now is existing use at the time of the bylaw, if you will, for which at that point was theoretically zero.
So they were not for the Little Pond, the
Correct.
most recent service area betterment.
They were not.
There's a really older betterment that they wouldn't do. Okay.
Right, and for any of the newer betterments that we do have, those SEUs, have the use in mind in order to determine what those betterments are going to be, and some of them are relatively large.
Anyone else? Doug?
Just for future, the reason I asked this question at the previous meeting was the fact that I was just thinking that with the possibility of putting a Title V septic there, and it's mostly a seasonal use, flushing into the Falmouth Harbor, which is not, there's no TMDLs for that, so we could have got away with a Title V there and saved our capacity for another place. We don't have that option because of the way that the law is written, but I would suggest that we start to implement that option for future, because who knows when this will come up again. So that's one thing I'd like to do, not relative to today's action, but that's something I think we should need to, another future agenda item to move that forward, so we'll at least have that option. And then otherwise, I think we should just go ahead and approve these projects and find some more discharge capacity.
That'll be on your agenda in 2 weeks.
Right, this is just for the policy today. Is there
Right.
any other thoughts or questions with respect to the policy?
Did you
The
hand out?
guidelines, actually.
No, I think that's very helpful.
Mr. Suso, or maybe more for town council, does the board need to actually vote the guidelines?
Yes, there should be an action of the board.
Is there someone that
Madam
is
Chair,
ready
just
for-
keeping in mind
Sure.
that this is a first draft, and the board may wish to have this evolve over time.
Well, I think we
Because-
need a policy for the hearing coming up.
Oh, no,
I think that
agreed.
was the whole point.
But I just wanted to assure the board that this doesn't mean you can't change it down the road, as Selectman Brown is suggesting, and others have suggested as well, because, as has been noted, we're breaking new ground here.
Right.
So as I read the process being recommended in the draft, is that we get the recommendation from the Board of Health saying that a on-site system could be in place. We get the recommendation from the wastewater management supervisor that they have the capacity, that we hold a public hearing on the proposed development,
Right.
considering the options of the, in this order of priority, of the effect of economic development, the effect on affordable housing, and the mixed-use development in a business use, business redevelopment zone, and then municipal use, and having those be priorities for granting a waiver.
Exactly. So is that your motion?
That's my motion. At that point, at this point, this is what our process should be, and we're going to need to fine-tune it and adjust it as we suit, but we need to have that process in place before our meeting in 2 weeks.
Second.
Selectman Jones, pardon my interruption, Madam
Yes,
Chair.
go right ahead.
I would hope you would also consider that sunset provision to set a time limit, and that would go with any motion on a development-by-development basis, so that it is not unlimited.
So you're saying once a waiver has been granted, they have 2 years to...
Correct, or whatever
To use it.
timetable you determine, so that it is not ongoing and does not hamstring the board if someone is, slow in moving forward.
Exactly.
But we could put that within the waiver grant, when we grant a waiver.
Exactly.
We can then put the sunset clause in the waiver.
On a case-by-case basis.
We don't necessarily have to have this be part of the process, right?
Correct.
The one thing I would say that I would favor being part of the process is that, so that developers would know what the expectation is.
Right, but I think when we grant the waiver, we tell them, and you have to get this done within a year, 2 years, 3 years.
But then we're analyzing the project and where it is.
No,
It's
no.
a little more complicated than just using this suggested definitive sunset provision of 2 years.
No, you just don't want them to sit on capacity.
Right.
Yeah,
Megan?
That might be used for something else.
Right, or, as we're hearing, I mean, planning for capacity, future capacity is a long-term, project that's going to require a lot of time, effort, and investment by the town. You don't want someone sitting on something. I mean, we're using these numbers to project going forward.
Right.
But I agree with Doug. I think it's something that you look at project by project, and that certainly, maybe we don't, they may not be completely ready to open their doors in 2 years, but the project is underway, and they're not just using it as a placeholder or sitting on it.
The only reason I'm not suggesting put the timetable in now is we may realize that the window's closing faster, and we need to actually make that be a shorter time period or not.
Madam Chair.
Okay, so.
Just to clarify one
Town
more-
council and then
One
Doug?
point is that The way it is set up right now, the flow neutral bylaw does not set an order in which anybody comes and seeks these permits. So the waiver that you would grant, assume you do, would be the first step, and there's a whole process
That goes on.
behind it. So if you're going to apply a sunset clause, it probably would be appropriate to tie it into the final approval, not your approval.
That was kind of my point.
Don't they have to still?
If I may, Madam Chair?
Please.
I think the point is it's a valuable resource that we want to steward. And if a developer takes 2 years before they finish filing their permits and then they want another 2 years, that's too long. So I think it is the timeline that you're interested in. The clock starts when you issue the waiver. And that's why, the suggestion is 2 years and not 6 months. It's understandable that larger projects are going to need some more time.
But, and again, I mean, they could always come back, if there was some unforeseen
To get an
circumstance, they can come back before the board and request, I mean, the board would have that power to request some additional time if it was a project that
Sure
ran
can.
into some kind of
That's within your
challenge.
purview.
Right, but if we include it in the guidelines now, they will have their expectations.
Just a question, we're not actually at the point where we have to grant waivers, we just have to approve connections. Is that correct?
No, for this
grant
project,
waivers.
we would have to grant the waiver.
So we're already at that point?
Yes.
We have.
You're at that point regardless of whether we're
At
at
capacity.
80% or 100%, because the bylaw states based on the particular property, there's a by right amount of capacity that the developer's entitled to, and then if they want if their project is above what that property is entitled to, they need a waiver.
I got it, okay.
And we still have the option of not granting the waiver, but we better have the ducks in a row to support why we did not grant the waiver, otherwise.
And be prepared to lose the project.
Ms. Boudreau,
Yep.
would you come?
Start futures market.
Good evening, Sari Budrow, Zoning Administrator. I just want the board to keep in mind that any special permit for commercial accommodations or multifamily dwellings is 3 years now under Mass General laws. And also your comprehensive permit is good for 3 years. A comprehensive permit can start the day before the 3 years. The special permits have to have a substantial start before the end of your 3-year. And that's under Mass General laws. So I just wanted to remind you when you're thinking about the sunset clause.
Very helpful. That may be why Mr. Jones did not include that in his motion.
Maybe.
Exactly.
So your motion is made. Is there a second?
I seconded it.
And so that would be for the guidelines 1, 2, and 3, correct?
Yep.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And thanks for all the staff who worked really
Thank you.
hard and quickly on that, and to the town manager and assistant town manager for leading that effort at the board's request.
Madam Chair, just one point for follow-up, and that is that there is a reference in the bylaw to consultation with the planning board. I didn't want to slow down the discussion because you have an action to take in 2 weeks. But as we, look at a longer time frame and future projects, we probably want to think about officially reaching out to the planning board for input, or perhaps putting it on an agenda for a joint meeting.
That sounds like a great idea, and appreciate the town planner, Tom Bott's involvement in this as well. Who I think is, thank you, there he is. Great. Okay, next we have a status report on Falmouth Heights sewer connection enforcement.
So I made a brief presentation, but I don't know that I need to give it on the...
Madam Chair, could I just underscore, this is
Please.
a status report, and we're not asking for any action by the board, but Amy, as assisted by Associate Town Council Pat Harris, will provide the presentation and answer questions.
Great.
But we're prepared to take action if we need to.
I'm Amy Lowell, I'm the town's wastewater superintendent.
Thank you.
You're not giving up your gun.
That's right.
The background is that, as you all know, and as we were just discussing, the town spent more than $30 million to construct the Little Pond Sewer Service Area system, and the goal of that was to improve the water quality in Little Pond. The Falmouth Heights portion of the sewer service area was made available in 2016, which is now 2 years ago. 435 properties have connected to the sewer in Falmouth Heights. That's out of 461 developed properties in that portion of the area. So the good news is that 94% of the properties in Falmouth Heights that abut the sewer system have connected to the sewer as required. The reason I'm here tonight, though, is there are 26 Falmouth Heights properties that haven't yet connected. As quoted tonight, the town sewer bylaw requires properties to connect to the sewer if they're in the sewer service area, and the bylaw actually says to do that within 90 days of notification of the requirement to do that. Given the size of this area and a number of challenges, more time was given, and in the end, extensions were given to allow people to connect to the sewer. So notifications to property owners. I've sent 4 letters now since that June 2016 availability date to the property owners in Falmouth Heights. There was a notice initially in June requesting connection by June of 2017. There was another notice in May of 2017, so almost a year later, providing an extension, and another extension of 6 months in November of 2017 to May 31st of 2018, which is a date that is just lapsed. In April of 2018, we sent out a final notice reminding and restating about the May 31st deadline. So again, we did allow quite a bit of additional time here to allow people the time that the maximum amount of time reasonable to connect to the sewer. Letters were sent to the addresses that are on file with the town's assessor's office. This is the address that's used for the tax bills and the water bills. And we updated that list with the assessor's office and GIS each time we did the mailing. The first letter was sent via regular mail, and the rest were sent via certified mail. So each of the letters said that each day after the connection deadline, you may be assessed a fine of $50 a day under the bylaw for failure to meet the requirement deadline. The last letter also said, further, if your property is not connected by the May 31st deadline, this matter will be referred to town council to pursue additional legal and equitable remedies for violation of the town code. This is just a couple of pictures of sewer connections being installed. As I said, a lot of people have actually done this work. On the left is a grinder pump connection. You can see the gravity line coming in from the house to the pump. There's a control panel on the wall, and then a low pressure line takes the flow out to the street. And this is a gravity line coming out of the house, out of the back of the house, and out alongside the house to the street. The issues related to failure to connect impact to Little Pond water quality and total maximum daily load compliance. The sewer system was constructed in order to improve Little Pond water quality. It obviously doesn't do that until all the properties are connected to the sewer system. We've gotten a number of emails and questions from other people who've already connected saying, what are you going to do about the people who haven't yet connected? So there's an issue of fairness. Finally, contribution of sewer revenue. The sewer rates are set to provide the funding to run the expanded sewer system, and we need the residents to connect in order to do that. So the next steps for the Falmouth Heights properties that are not connected is to begin issuing notices of violation of the town bylaw, chapter 180-6, which is the requirement that they connect to the sewer. The fine for this violation is $50 a day. This notice will be issued to the properties in the sewer service area that have a water service but are not yet connected to the sewer. If the fines go unpaid, the town will follow up through Falmouth District Court, and ultimately, hopefully that will do the trick. If we are unsuccessful along that route, then we will, as previously discussed, refer to town council and pursue it further if needed.
Ms. Lowell, quick
yes,
question.
Go ahead.
Would it be part of the process that these folks would be called to see if there was some explanation, they moved, or might that save some time and trouble if, only 25 or 26 people?
So I don't know that we have the town has a phone number available. A lot of these properties are second properties. They're not necessarily a primary home. We can certainly mail to both the local address and the legal address. In the past, as I said, we've always mailed to the legal address. I can knock on doors, but I don't necessarily have a phone number available for each of these properties.
Being in the legal business, I
Yep.
Google people and I call them too, so just a question.
Okay.
Doug?
And are we getting our water bills and real estate tax bills paid for these 26 places?
Almost all of them.
Okay. Because I think ones that we're not getting the other bills paid for,
Right.
I can understand why it might, but the ones who are paying their
Right.
other bills are certainly getting the notification if they're getting their tax bills and water bills already.
Correct.
So this gives you the authority to impose this violation on your own when you deem it necessary, correct?
Yes. Yes, it's the board, it's the wastewater superintendent's authority to issue these fines. I'm reporting to the selectmen on the process and the plan to do so.
Thank you. Any questions?
No, I would just second that. I know you've done your due diligence in terms of trying to mail to all these folks, but maybe a phone call, if we can find phone numbers to just, I don't know, sometimes folks put this at the bottom, and because so many extensions have been granted, I think some folks have just, they've decided that the end of the road is not coming. They're going to
Right.
continuously have more time, so.
Right, I did, I understand, I was concerned about that myself, and that's why there were the two final notices both had the same date, and the last one said, this is it, there's no more extensions. So they had two notices that, with the same final date on them. But I will try the phone call method. And so the town will begin pursuing the fines through this system.
And the big thing is, to already have such a high percentage connected, it's really, also reporting about a, good job done, so we certainly
have
appreciate
26
that as
left
well. That's pretty good.
Actually, I had a final slide, which was about the rest of the service area. Mara Vista and T-Ticket Highway, there are, properties in the remainder of the service area. That area was complete and made available a year later than the Falmouth Heights area, so they have an additional year to connect. More than 450 properties in Mara Vista T-Ticket Highway area have connected. That includes about 20 commercial properties. So that portion of the service area is about 52% complete. The final Mara Vista T-Ticket Highway connection deadline is April 30th, 2019. That deadline will not be extended again. That is already, rather than do 2 6-month extensions, the last extension I gave to that area was a 12-month extension, and that's the final deadline for the remainder of the service area. So hopefully everybody in that area will connect, and I won't have to come back to you, but if not, then I'll be back with a similar message in beginning of May 2019.
Well, you've had a lot of people have questions, so it's important information. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great, all set, thank you. Next, we have the Senior Center Schematic Design Update and Vote. Mr. Vieira?
Good evening. Jim Vieira, Chairman of the Building Committee for the new Senior Center. This is the follow-up, Part 2 of our schematic design presentation. And what we are here to talk about tonight is the connector. Our Building Committee met this past Wednesday, and we came up with a 2-part recommendation that we'd like to propose tonight. And I think I have a couple of committee members here with me. Peggy Nickerson and Mike Duffany. And Jill Bishop is also here, our director. So this is what we spoke about. The need for a centralized entrance, and we spoke a little bit about that 2 weeks ago. We also wanted to make sure we had efficient use of the space between the buildings, efficient use of the interior building space, comfortable access from one building to the other, and access to Gov Fuller Field. And really that last one is kind of important because we're looking at this site as a whole and not just the senior center. We're looking at it in relation to Gus Canty, what happens in the back, the Commodores, Falmouth High School baseball, and the future playground. So incorporating all of those really went into this decision. And we had Joe Olenek, the director of the rec department. I think Joe is here.
He's there, right.
He's an honorary part of our group. He comes to our meetings, he has a lot of input, and he's very valuable to us. And we also had members of the Commodores at our meeting on Wednesday night for their input. So what you see here is part of our recommendation. You see across the front is where the connector is. And that is an open-air connector. It provides a visual, physical connector between the two buildings and joins the two buildings in a simple way. And sometimes the simple, uncomplicated solutions tend to be the best. It's an open-air connector, but it will provide really a covered area, not only to get between the two buildings, but really a nice covered area for drop-off and pickup, not just for the seniors, but also for the people using the rec building. Option 10 is what we're recommending tonight. It's really a combination of two options, 8 and 9, and I'm going to just kind of walk you through it. Here on the right side is the rec building. And so what we're trying to do here is we're trying to get an unfettered access to the back. So these are existing steps that go up to the front entryway of the rec building. And there's also a set of steps currently here. What we're proposing is we're going to remove those steps and have a sloped walkway up to the side door. And this is a 1 in 20 slope. Typical handicapped access is 1 in 8, so this is more like a sloped walkway than a ramp, so you don't need guardrails or any of that. So you walk up here, you have access to the side entry. This is a flat area that's there now, and then another sloped walk down to the existing sidewalk in the back. So what happens is if you're coming in, here's our covered walkway. You come from the senior center, you can come across, you can either go up the steps and go on the main entry, you can come down. For a more accessible entrance, you can go up here to the side entry. People parking at the front of the building that are going to the field, if you're going to the playground with a stroller, or if you're going out to the Commodores, then you have an unencumbered access straight through. So that's visually, it's a straight shot between the two buildings. Okay. I keep going the wrong way. Here's just a sort of a visual of how you can get from one building to the next. Here's the main door from the senior center coming across. You can go up this ramp, or you can go across up the steps.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
While you're at that point, so where the ramp is now at the Gus Canty, the other ramp, that'll remain.
Yes.
Correct. But will there be appropriate curb cuts for folks to be dropped off at this section here, or are folks going to have to kind of, if they're coming, say someone is trying to, I know we're going to reconfigure the parking anyway, but
right.
In other words, where there'll be, a good access point for folks in wheelchairs from this drop-off spot now? So,
absolutely.
Okay.
And that's part of getting into our building as well as getting into
right.
As well as getting through here and getting into the main entrance. So you have this covered portico all the way across, a great place for benches, for people waiting for rides, both the seniors and people using the rec. A great drop-off for kids going to the programs in the back. It's safe. You're not walking down the street. Kids can go right through the middle. Just another view. Actually, these Just want to make a comment. These are side doors. They go into the front building of that, the front room of the recreation building. That room has 2 sets of doors that go to the outside. This set of doors will most likely be removed because this is a sloped walkway. It would be awkward getting in those doors.
Or they could really just be permanently secured.
That's right, just so that non-operable.
Megan?
I'm sorry, is that, I know we're getting to some of the details, but that, Joe, is that door at the end of that ramp, is that a push handicap, or it's not because those are stairs right now? So that'll have to.
There's stairs there right now.
So that would be changed.
Both sets of doors on the front porch and the side porch are both emergency doors, push bars.
Right.
To get out of the building.
But since that would kind of be another handicap access point for the Gus Canty, that presumably would also be fitted with the same push door that the front door has.
This is going to be the side door.
Handicap assist.
Yeah.
Right, handicap assist. I'm just saying, if we're putting a ramp to invite folks,
Right
as if
there.
that's a handicap entrance, we want to make sure that it's an actual handicap entrance into the Gus Canty.
So it's an automated door.
So it's an automated.
Just a battery.
Not on that side.
I know it's not right now.
On the front side there is, on the side there is not.
Right, I just think.
I'm sure that can be.
It can be easily added with the battery
That's what I'm
operated.
just saying. I think we don't want to invite folks as if it's accessible and then it's not.
Yeah, I think that can be easily done.
That's great.
I want to just show you a little bit about the side connector. And BH&A showed us multiple options as to how we could do this. And this is the most simple one. It shows a sloped ramp directly from this area all the way across. What happens, one of the reasons that ultimately we went in a different direction is because you don't have a straight shot right through the building. You get doors here, you have doors here. We don't have the ramp here, we have the steps. If we decided to put the ramp here also, that was going to take us way over our budget. So we had to make some choices. We lose a janitor's closet here by doing this, and a janitor's closet might not seem like a big thing to us, but from the custodial's point of view, it's a big thing. And generally, it really hampered the access to get to the field. Practically speaking, if we want to encourage people to get to the playground and not be on the street and go through here. On Sundays, we have an issue of unlocking and locking the doors. We have this space being unmonitored when the buildings aren't being used. And it's something that created more problems than it solved. And that's ultimately why we went to put the connector on the front. One of the other things that we thought, I'll just show you what that looks like. So here's the connector coming across, a bigger space to sort of maneuver within that area. Doors here, doors on the other side. It just didn't seem to be practical for us. The other issue is that it cuts right across our open space. What we have an opportunity to do with outside space here is connect it all the way to the front. By doing this here, now we've got our patio basically enclosed on 3 sides. So without this, you have this wonderful area that this will be connected, of course, in this slide. But you have this nice area all the way through. You'll have this nice area all the way through. Good air circulation through. We're not enclosing our patio, and we gain this extra usable space for a Zen garden or just a walkway with some benches, just some nice green space.
But it's still fenced.
Yes, this, in the back here, this is a drop-off because the site is lower in the back, so there's no access to the patio from the back because that would be steps. This is fenced all the way across, all the way down here. So you get in and out from here, in and out of the senior center, to the patio and back in. Down here, there'd probably be a gate, mostly just for maintenance workers to go in there and get the leaves out and do that kind of stuff. So really, we have controlled access. With our plan, everybody comes and goes to the front door. You come and go through the patio through this door, but you don't go anywhere from the patio other than back into the building.
Oh, so the patio is open to this whole green space now, and you move the fence out to the front, is that the idea?
Right.
Oh, I like that.
So the fence, the roof line ends up here someplace, so it goes right up to there. Let's see what's next. Cost estimates. So the option one, which was the enclosed connector in the middle of the building, is, and these are rough figures provided by the architect, was $160,000. We're recommending option 8 and 9 together, which gives us a cost estimate of about $165,000, which is within our budget. And that's it. You see these folks right here. There'll still be a sidewalk along the side of the building, along the road, the driveway, so you'll still be able to access here, but we're, really this is our drop-off area, and for people going back to the field, it'll be a straight shot right through there. So, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I think it's great. I mean, I think you heard some of the concerns from folks, and I think aesthetically it's very pleasing because you have that view all the way to the field and to that green space, to just have that open access. I think it's more user-friendly this way with the access to the field for folks who need, they're not going all the way around either side of the building. And I really like that physical connection in the front rather than one little hallway connecting the two. Really, I think it's the message that we've talked about all along, that this is a community campus, and we have a senior center, we have a rec center, but we're really, thinking about this entire space as a community campus, municipal campus. So I think that physical connector is great. So thank you for reworking.
And that really becomes a shared space.
Yes. Yeah.
Just a quick question, it's a little bit off track here, but remind me, are we still having people exit to Dillingham so that we're not dumping everyone on Main Street, or?
Yes.
Great.
So it's a one-way down there, so you get out.
Great.
You don't come in that way.
Nice.
You have the two ways to come in now. We have the second entrance on Main Street, and you can also get out the back.
Great, thanks very much, great presentation. And
But
Doug?
now that the football program's been voted to move to the high school, we could make that two-way if we choose to, right?
I guess we'd have to ask the engineers to look at that and see how much room you'd be taking out of the space. But right now, the way it's proposed, it's a one-lane road down there.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Great, thanks very much.
I think we can do a vote to vote our support of their design that has been proposed for us.
Option 10?
Option 10, well, I think it's also something we
As
saw 2
presented.
weeks ago, the whole design,
Yep.
Yeah.
but in supporting their recommendation of option 10.
Yeah.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
All three of us.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank
Great,
you.
thank you so much.
Great job.
Nice solution.
Next, we have a status report from Town Council and discussion on potential participation with a law firm on the opioid litigation.
Lights.
Town Council.
Lights?
Lights? Doug? He wants the spotlight. You know,
Yeah,
Frank.
White hot spotlight.
Helps me read my notes a little bit easier.
Okay.
Frank Duffy, Town Council. I'm here now, I think a couple of weeks after I was here before, when I gave you a preliminary report on the opioid litigation and the suggestion that Falmouth look into engaging special counsel to represent us in this matter. It's a field of law that's very new. It's growing.
It's changing.
And I think it merits participation at this point. The special counsel would be engaged to represent the town to recover the costs associated with the town's response to the current opioid addiction crisis, which is not limited to Falmouth, but all the surrounding communities, and actually goes coast to coast in our country. Back on March 26th, you directed the town manager and me to come back with a recommendation, and we have done so. The law firm that we would engage as special counsel would prepare and file a lawsuit on behalf of the town of Falmouth against manufacturers and distributors of pharmaceutical opioids and seek compensatory damages. Each municipality in this endeavor would have to file its own lawsuit. There may be some conception out there that this is part of a class action. It is not. Each municipality around the country is on its own, in a sense that there are discrete individual lawsuits that have to be filed. Now, as we found out in our research and interviews, there are two recommended procedures that could be followed here. The first is for municipalities to file independent lawsuits in state courts to seek jury trials before local juries, hoping to find a sympathetic jury that will award maximum damages to one of its own communities. We interviewed one firm that recommended that approach. The other approach is, which is followed in federal courts, is to file cases in the federal court system, ultimately to participate in what is known as the multi-district litigation program of the United States District Courts. It's being established in the Northern District of Ohio, which I believe is Cleveland, and there's a judge out there who's responsible for all of these cases nationally, and that's where all of these cases will be processed, and that's that plan. Now, you do have a choice as to which procedure you would like to follow. What are the theories of recovery that a municipality could lean on to recover compensatory damages? I'm just going to give you a couple of them. There may be more, but these are the ones that have been mentioned to us and the literature suggests are feasible. One is a violation of the Controlled Substances Act of 1970. There's also the possibility, and probably provable, that there have been false and deceptive marketing claims by pharmaceutical manufacturers and distributors with respect to opioids and their impact on communities. There's would be alleged negligent failure of these pharmaceutical manufacturers and distributors to detect abuse. One of the obligations of the manufacturers of drugs is to follow their use right down to the end user and detect abuses and report it, and if there are detected abuses, to do something about it. At the same time, there would be an allegation that either the manufacturers and distributors either failed to do this, or if they did it, they hid the results, and they negligently failed or acted indifferently towards detected abuse. And as a result, the opioid addiction got out of control in many communities. We also have public nuisance theories of recovery. And finally, this is kind of a little bit, I wasn't quite expecting this, but the various people that we'd interviewed say they would bring a claim under what is known as RICO, R-I-C-O, which is the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organization Act, which is an act I think Congress passed probably to get at organized crime, but really it addresses any conspiracy on an industry-wide basis. So there would be allegations that the various manufacturers knew what the others were doing. There was kind of an implicit agreement among them, certainly not written, that they would market their product in this way, and as a result, these damages ensued. The recoverable damages that we're looking for would be the cost of medical care provided for victims of opioid addiction, including overdoses and death, the cost to the community of first responders, the cost of treatment, rehabilitation, and counseling and substance abuse programs that the community must organize and prepare and provide for its citizens, the cost of public education programs, which would be both by the town and by the school system to educate both children and adults, the cost of welfare and children protective services to the extent that the municipality is engaged in providing these services, the cost of law enforcement and public safety issues. This is not directly related to the first responder, but many of the people who have opioid addictions or similar addictions violate laws, and it requires a lot of attention of the police department and the fire department to attend to their needs and the needs of the community. We also have, as is the practice in this municipality and others, the municipality pays a portion of the health care insurance of its employees, and it's been documented that medical insurance costs are rising throughout the country based upon the opioid addiction as one of the causes of increased use of medical treatment. And finally, there is the cost associated to the municipality itself, because although we may not know who they are, we do know that we have addicted employees working for us, and that their job performance and their absenteeism are problems, which if we can identify, we could receive some compensation for, perhaps to help them with treatment and other expenses incurred.
So Frank, in sum, the board is being asked, we've been solicited by 2 different law firms.
Right.
Very similar to the tobacco litigation of days before,
Yes.
where it would be a contingency case.
Right, it's contingent fee basis, and I'm going to give you a brief summary of the 2 interviews that we had. Just take a minute or 2.
Great,
Is
and
there-
Doug, you have a question?
Before you
first?
move to another subject, isn't there any way we can also include loss of life?
Well, that's a difficult question. We are trying to recover the costs of the municipality. We cannot recover the costs that are directly recoverable by an individual or an individual family. However, if we can attribute or document costs of loss of life as an expense to the community, yes, we could. I'm not quite sure how we do that. I'd rely on these people to help us figure that out.
There must be a way. I mean, if it's 22 people this year, it's probably a few hundred over the course of this whole saga. And those are important members of our community that would be contributing and making a difference.
This is one of the points that these folks have given to us that they've raised as to what they can do for us, and I'll just go through that. But you do, Mr. Brown, bring up a good point. There's 2 components to recoverable damages. The first component is costs that we've already incurred, and the second component is costs that we are going to incur going into the future, and we'd be asking for relief on both accounts. And it might very well, just speculating now, result in some kind of a structured settlement that will result in payments over time. But that's something we'd have to address later on. We did interview 2 firms. Both firms had originally contacted us and asked to be interviewed. So Mr. Suso put together a team, and it consisted of himself and myself. Also, Chief Small of the Fire Rescue Department, Chief Edward Dunn of the Falmouth Police Department, Susie Hoffman, Director of Falmouth Human Services, and Patrick Murphy, who's the Finance Director of the Falmouth Public Schools, which is a big constituent group in this claim. We did interview 2 firms. They were held on May 11th and May 15th. Each interview lasted somewhere in the magnitude of about an hour and 20 minutes to an hour and a half. We asked each firm to make an opening statement, and then as a group, we asked them prepared questions that we had prepared in writing beforehand, and we basically tried to ask the same questions of both groups so we'd get a way to compare them. And then after the interviews, we met as a group, and we discussed the interviews and our reactions to them, and we came to a consensus, which I will report to you. The first group that we interviewed was Scott & Scott. This is a national law firm headquartered in New York City. It was originally founded in Connecticut. It has a special practice group of attorneys who are dedicated solely to representing municipalities in opioid litigation. It has a Massachusetts connection through a firm of Anderson and Krieger in Cambridge. This group of attorneys will pursue opioid litigation on behalf of the municipality, and they also maintain a staff of support people who will come to Falmouth, interview our people here, and help us identify damages, prepare the case, respond to discovery, and address any public relations concerns or questions that may arise. Scott & Scott is the firm that advocates filing in local state court, seeking trials before local juries. So they would advocate filing in the Barnstable Superior Court, and I'll address that in a minute. In their view, by filing in a local court, you're more likely to secure a responsive judgment or settlement. The second group that we interviewed it's got kind of a mouthful of the name here, but it's a consortium known as the Massachusetts Opioid Litigation Attorneys, or MOLA, MOLA. This consists of 3 Massachusetts law firms from the Boston area, and they have allied with several other national law firms for support. Most of their client municipalities are in Massachusetts. They also have a dedicated group of attorneys who will pursue only opioid litigation on behalf of municipalities, and they too offer a full range of expected support services. They will come to Falmouth, they will meet with the people from the department of the school department, the fire department, the police department. They will help us prepare the case and all the attendant things that go along with it. This group advocates filing all claims in the local United States District Court, which for us is Boston, with the understanding that because of the presence of the the multi-district litigation program out in Ohio, the case will be referred out there where it will be assembled with all other similar cases where there is one judge who has been given really very extensive powers to deal with these cases. And this is viewed by some, or many actually, as a more effective way of handling these cases. There will be judicial economy. There will also be shared discovery. There will perhaps be less burden on each individual community's participation. Now, it is their view that we're more likely to have a successful resolution following that path. So when we met as a group afterwards, we came to the consensus that we would recommend to you the Massachusetts Opioid Litigation Attorneys, and that we would file our claim in the United States District Court and participate in the multi-district litigation program. This group has more Massachusetts connections, and we feel that the local connection would be helpful in representing our case in court. Now, many people feel this multi-district litigation has merit because, as I said, it's a more efficient use of judicial time and our time, but it also will result in some consistent decisions, so that if there are preliminary motions that have to be heard, there'll be the same answer in all of the preliminary motions, and you won't be relying on you won't be trying to reconcile different decisions in different courts if you file at the state level. It's also our feeling that one other point I'd like to mention. If you file in state court any claim that names as a defendant a resident of another state, there's what they call diversity of citizenship, and that case may automatically be removed to federal court. And once it gets removed to federal court in Boston, it's going to go right out to Ohio. Now, you can fight that and perhaps get it sent back to your local community, but in our view, that was going to take a lot of time and effort and probably just detract from the real purpose of what we're trying to do. So the team considered it prudent to start where we're likely to end up, if I can summarize.
So the
quickly.
team's recommendation was what firm?
Massachusetts Opioid Litigation Attorneys, MOLA. It's a consortium of 6 firms. I have the list.
I think that sounds like a great plan. You have a great team ahead of it, and I would move that we go ahead with that.
We have a motion.
A second.
And a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Great job, Frank.
Yeah.
Okay, can I
Thank you very much. Sam?
ask it seems like this type of litigation is really going to be following what models that have been set up by the tobacco litigation, but we also have alcoholism, in the sense that alcoholism degrades productivity of employees and causes other sort of parallel health hazards. Are we going to have models from both of those previous examples of litigation that will help us, find a path that's likely to be more efficient?
Well, the 2 previous models that we'd be following would be the tobacco litigation and the asbestos litigation. The asbestos litigation, 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 the asb There's no concurrent alcohol litigation that I'm aware of. Alcohol presents a number of problems from a litigation point of view that hasn't reached to the point where anybody's seeking to recover that. But the judge in Ohio, if the plan is to have a common approach to all of these cases. If there's problems that have to be demonstrated by taking a couple cases to trial, I've been advised that they will prepare and present what they call bellwether cases with select communities. And everybody will be in this together, and there will be at some point, and everybody I've talked to feels that these will be resolved by a settlement of some kind, and it will be a structured settlement of some kind, and that very few people will, in the end, actually see the inside of a courtroom.
That's right. Thank you very much. Sorry to rush along, but just a little time conscious about all the interviewees who've been waiting for so long. Thanks so much, Frank. Next, we have the status update on historic underground aquifer contamination from Joint Base Cape Cod. Hi, thanks for waiting. Welcome.
So Doug provided some handouts.
Great.
I do have just for you.
Yes. Yes, we do.
Yep. I think we have our own. Thank you.
He is going to come from JVCC.
You must be Vanna.
Multiple Vannas.
All Vannas.
And we also have some fact sheets.
We do.
Can we maybe turn it
Yes.
to the audience?
Can we turn them to the audience a little bit? Can we like angle it?
Because we have them.
We have.
Yeah, we have our own.
Okay, so you have your
Right.
handouts. All right.
Yeah, good,
There you
thanks.
go. That's good enough. All right.
Okay, we did.
Okay. All right. So is the microphone on?
Yes,
yeah.
it's
Okay.
just for the TV.
It's for broadcast.
Okay, okay. All right.
Going
well-
live.
All right, well, thank you for having us. And so we're from the Air Force Civil Engineer Center, myself with Rose Forbes and Doug Carson. And then we also have General Foe here, who's the Assistant Adjutant General for Air, is also the Executive Director of Joint Base Cape Cod. And Gerard Martin is here. He sat down already. He's from Mass DEP, so he oversees our program in addition to EPA. So tonight, we were asked to just give an overview of our program and then focus a little bit on emerging contaminant that we're working on called PFAS, and I'll get to that in a minute or so. But I just want to point out this big poster that we have here. This is Joint Base Cape Cod in the white. It's 22,000 acres. And the areas, the colored areas that you see on there are areas of groundwater contamination. We call them plumes. There are two cleanup programs on the base. One's called the Impact Area Groundwater Study Program. That's the Army program. And they work with mostly the northern 15,000 acres, so explosives, perchlorate, UXO. And then our program, the Air Force Cleanup Program, we focus primarily on the southern portion of the base. We call it the southern 7,000 acres, but also off base because a lot of the contamination has migrated off base into the surrounding towns, Bourne, Falmouth, and Mashpee, and Sandwich as well. But tonight, obviously, I'm here to talk about Falmouth. So I just want to highlight the successes of our program so far. We've been doing this since 1996, investigating and cleaning up. We've installed over 100 extraction and reinjection wells. We have over 27 miles of pipeline, 9 pump and treat systems, and at one point we were treating 18 million gallons per day. We're down to 10 million gallons per day because the plumes are cleaning up. We're removing contamination. In Falmouth, we manage 7 groundwater plumes. We refer to some of them as the Southwest Operable Unit. There's 4 there, but a total of 7. And right now, we can no longer define or delineate 3 of them because the contamination has decreased below standards. So good news story. And the other remaining plumes, they're shrinking in size, which is also good. So it's just a testament to the success of the program. One of the plumes that we're managing right in Falmouth is Shumet Valley. So that one is originally a chlorinated solvent plume. The contaminants of concern there were TCE and PCE, or still are. There's some residual contamination there. We put in 3 extraction wells. We're operating 1 extraction well right now. But with the Shumet Valley, we've also identified some emerging contaminants. So where our program was kind of in steady state and even winding down, now we're back to the investigation phase because of the identification of these emerging contaminants. So you're probably thinking or asking, what are emerging contaminants? And they're contaminants that may have been out there for a long time, but they were never investigated. The tools for analyzing for them or detecting them might not have been available. In this particular case, EPA identified PFAS, which is per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, so we call it PFAS. And there's how should I say this? There's hundreds of compounds within this group of PFAS, but there are only 2 that have a health advisory that EPA has issued. And those are PFOS, perfluorooctane sulfonic acid, which is why we call it PFOS, and perfluorooctanoic acid, which is PFOA. So those are the 2 that we're looking at with respect to the PFAS contamination. And then there's another emerging contaminant that we're also looking at is dioxane. So I just wanted to talk a little bit more about the PFAS. And Doug, would you mind stepping over here so you can point out? So going back to the Shumet Valley plume, the source areas of the Shumet Valley plume are the former fire training area that was used from 1958 to 1985, and also the old wastewater treatment plant. So with the fire training area, the PFAS is a constituent of AFFF. Sorry for so many acronyms, but it's aqueous film forming foam. And that's what the fire departments use to put out fires or to suppress vapors. So if you have a tanker truck rollover and you have fuel that's spilled out, the fire departments are going to show up and they're going to spray foam on them. Now, most of the foam that's used right now on the base and other places as well, other fire departments, is AFFF, and it has PFAS constituents in it. This PFOS, PFOA that has the health advisory. So that's with respect to the wastewater treatment plant. So what they used to do, what they used to do at the former fire training area is they would put chlorinated solvents or fuels or anything that would burn, they would put it on the ground, ignite it, and then practice putting out the fires. That's why it's called the fire training area. And they would use foam. So we already knew about the chlorinated solvents, we knew about the fuels, so we were addressing those in the groundwater. And then not too long ago, about 5 years ago now, it was identified that, hey, you should be looking for these PFAS compounds as well. So we've been doing that, and also dioxane. And there's kind of 2 areas of the Shumet Valley source areas that I want to talk about. This one is related to the Courier Road area in Falmouth. We do have, are the extraction wells on here, Doug? So as I mentioned earlier, we put in 3 extraction wells to target the chlorinated solvents. So the extraction wells pump out the contamination, it goes through carbon, and we have 2 carbon treatment systems there, and then the treated water goes out into infiltration trenches. The infiltration trenches are shallow, all right, so this is part of the issue here. So we were operating the carbon system since 1999, and again, not knowing about the PFAS and dioxane, at some point they broke through. They went through the carbon without being treated any longer. And when we started investigating, we recognized that, okay, if it's going through and we're seeing it in the effluent of the system, then it's probably in the infiltration trenches, and it might be in some of the private wells that are next to this infiltration trench along Courier Road, and it was there. So we've been sampling all the private wells. We've identified all of them along that stretch. And then where we've had detections above the health advisory, we've been mitigating. So we provide bottled water, or we'll put whole house filtration systems on. So that's what we've been doing in that area. Is there anything you want to add?
No, the residents out there have been very cooperative. Obviously, they're getting their wells tested and providing bottled water, and also providing the filtration systems that we put out there. That's been going on for quite some time now, a couple of years. And one of the things that's going to happen, the infiltration trenches that Rose was talking about are shown on this map in blue, and we expect over time that all that's going to flush through. You know, what was discharged before that wasn't being cleaned by the
Madam Chair, should we give this gentleman the microphone?
Great idea.
It just pulls right out.
It's for the folks at home. We can all hear you, but as far as the TV goes?
Oh, absolutely.
Great.
So the the green, I know it looks blue, but the
Right.
green are actually not intact. So the reds are where we have.
Right, this is a map that shows over time, how the testing has been going. The green blocks that you see here are ones that have tested clean over time, and they change. There'll be a little bit of fluctuation, but the point I'm trying to make is there was discharge of treated water here, but the PFOS, PFOA was not removed, all of it. And some 1,4-dioxane was also discharged, but what we're seeing, I have seen historically in this area, is an exceedance of the health advisory for PFOS, PFOA, and that necessitated the bottled water and the carbon out in that area. But over time, as the groundwater keeps moving 1 to 2 feet per day to the south, and we're no longer discharging to those beds, clean water is going to flush through, and anything that might be to the north in terms of PFOS, PFOA, by the time it gets down there, like coming from the former firefighter training area that Rose was talking about, that's going to be much deeper, so we would not anticipate that it would impact the wells that are out there. So at some point, the bottled water will cease, the carbon filtration systems either will be removed or there'll be a decision about whether the homeowner wants to maintain them themselves over time, but that's down the road a little bit, so.
Right, so just to make sure that we all understand, so we did stop discharging to the infiltration trench even though that we're still operating the system. We have the water going to the infiltration trench on the Sandwich Road side, which there are no private wells that are being impacted because over in that area. So again, this is going to flush out, and you can already kind of see if you follow the red from left to right how it's moving through and it's being diluted by clean water. And so that's what we're doing at the Courier Road area. And now you want to go to the next. So we have another figure. This one's a much broader area. So again, going back to those source areas, the wastewater treatment, the fire training area is located up here in the circle. You can just barely see it. And then the former sewage treatment plant is located just south of there, both right next to the base boundary. So they migrated off base. At some point, they created the Shumat Valley plume, and at another points, they discharged into a Shumat and Johns Pond. So this is where, as we were investigating, we sampled the pond, and the surface water came back in both ponds above the health advisory. Now, health advisories are drinking water. They're related to drinking water. And we have consulted with Mass DPH on the recreation in the ponds, and they have stated that it's safe to recreate, even though we have these exceedances of the health advisory, because nobody's really drinking the pond water. But regardless, so because the contamination's migrating from on base, upwelling into a Shumat pond, and then migrating into Johns Pond, and then it flows down gradient, because these are kettle holes. So kettle holes are basically groundwater. So when you're looking at the ponds, you're looking at groundwater. And they feed basically the aquifer down gradient, which is where some people get their drinking water from. Some people still have private wells out there. We've connected a lot of people to municipal water in the past, but there are still some out there, and we've been identifying those. We have an outreach program. When we find them, we sample them. Again, if it's above the health advisory, we provide the bottled water. We provide whole house filtration systems, or in this case, because we anticipate that contamination is going to be there for decades, we look at doing municipal water connections. And that's what we've been doing in this area, primarily in Mashpee, and then one in Falmouth. You want to point out that general area of the upper reach of Courier.
Yeah, the upper reach, Shumat Pond on the left-hand side of Shumat Pond.
Because that,
property that we looked at.
yeah, that particular well is being fed by the pond water. So we've been doing a lot of investigation. That's what those red lines are on the figure. Those are, we call them transects. We have a direct push rig. We've been out there doing groundwater vertical profiling, collecting a lot of data to support our investigation, and ultimately help us decide what we're going to do with it. Meaning, what's our decision going to be with respect to cleanup, monitoring, and/or continued mitigation. Do we have another slide after that?
Yeah. Just one thing to add, we talked about Courier Road before, now we're talking about the area around the Shumat and Johns Pond, on the edge of the town of Falmouth, over by Antone Ave, and then getting into Mashpee. The difference between this particular area around the ponds is that the groundwater contamination is going to be around for a very long time. Whereas when we were talking about Courier Road, that is something that is eventually going to flush through over the next couple of years, and as we talked about, we've already seen evidence of that by sampling the groundwater, sampling the private wells out there, so that's a good thing.
Right. And then, in addition to the existing groundwater plumes that we had, we also did a preliminary assessment going, okay, where else do we use AFFF on the base? AFFF, again, is that aqueous film-forming foam. It's the foam the fire department uses, and that's what has the PFOS and PFOA in it. So we identified several other locations on the base that we need to investigate. Those include hangars that have AFFF foam suppression systems in them. You want to you could point out up here where the hangars are. Okay.
This is a blow-up of that southeast portion of the base.
Yeah, so
these
this
are the runways on the base?
Yep. And so the hangars, there was an area where they did time and distance training with the hoses, so they would just, use the foam, see how far it would go, how long it would take, that kind of thing. So that has some pretty high concentrations in it. An area at vehicles where a snowplow hit a vehicle truck and fuel was released, and the fire department responded and they put foam on it. Also a couple rollovers near Otis Rotary where fuel was released. One was actually a tanker truck delivering fuel down to the Steamship Authority. Another one was coming onto the base, but the base fire department at the time responded to it, put AFFF foam on it, and that's in Bourne. We've been investigating that one for a little longer at this point. But just trying to point out that there's a number of other sites that we're looking at and we're investigating, and then at some point, we'll have to make a decision on what needs to be done here after we collect the data.
Would those be tracked going forward in terms of their movement?
Right, yeah, so we look at, as part of our investigations, we determine nature and extent, so what are the concentrations and how far do they go, and then the fate and transport, where are they going to end up? So
do you have that extrapolated so that folks can anticipate?
Right, yeah, after this many years of doing this work, we have a good idea where the groundwater is going to go and where it's going to flow to and how long it's going to take. There's some special properties associated with these PFAS constituents, though. They could be slowed down by any kind of organic matter in the soil. So they could be higher concentrations near the source area, like we're seeing at the fire training area, and then it just slowly leaches out over time with precipitation. So these are different contaminants than what we're used to dealing with, but that's something that we're obviously investigating. And there's a lot of information out there now because other people have been investigating it for a while.
Is this on a website, perhaps, that folks could consult?
It's not really on the website, but folks can always call us. We're happy to, meet with people and, talk with them.
Yeah, and I brought extra copies of the fact sheets to provide to the board members.
We can put that on our website.
I have them right over here. There's probably like a dozen, so if somebody wants to grab one on the way out.
Great. Doug?
Really, any foam station that you have, they have to clear out the lines and throw some foam around every year, don't they?
What do you mean by that? I'm sorry.
Well, wherever these facilities are that have these foam firefighting stations, don't you have maintenance that has to be done, and they routinely clear the lines and blow that stuff out?
No, right now, the only places where there's actually AFFF still on the base is at the fire department in the trucks, and they have them in the storage containers too, but once it's in the trucks, it doesn't come out until they use it.
Oh, so there's no stations at the hangars and so forth?
There are fire suppression systems using AFFF at 2 of the Coast Guard hangars. They're looking at replacing one in its entirety in a couple years, and the other one they're still evaluating options on. So the idea is, people recognize the issues with the foam and the PFAS constituents of the foam, and people are trying to understand what the options are and take care of it.
Mm-hmm. Is there any kind of environmentally friendly substitute for the foam, like soybeans or something?
Well, there used to be protein foam a long time ago. It was made out of animal fat, but they don't use that anymore. They're looking at shorter chain, without getting too heavy into the chemistry. These PFAS compounds are 8 chains, so there's 8 carbon connected to a fluorine bond. So those are the bad ones, and they're looking at doing a 6 chain. Now, is a 6 chain any better than 8 chain? Well, I don't think that answer has been given yet.
Okay.
Megan?
I would just, this is such great information, and I think that for a lot of people, it's, alarming because many of us lived through the first, kind of, emergency of the water contamination, particularly folks out in that area.
Sure.
I mean, maybe at some point, I know you're saying folks can call you, but it has to be on their radar. And I think I wasn't aware that it was, until we had our last meeting, we kind of brought up that it was to this extent that you are still conducting so much testing and are really still at the point of tracking some contaminants that are migrating, actively kind of still migrating from the base. So I don't know, maybe if at some point there's a kind of a more public presentation, so individuals in that area might just be able to, understand and calm some of their fears because they can see what you're doing to track some of it.
We have done a couple of site-specific public meetings, right? There's been at least 2 in Falmouth. And then we have the Joint Base Cape Cod Cleanup Team meetings, and we often have updates on these, and those are open to the public, and we put those in the newspaper.
We advertise them.
Is there anything else?
Yep, we advertise those meetings, and we make available the fact sheets that we have. I would say that over the last several years, we've been concentrating our efforts on dealing directly with the stakeholders, that is the property owners out in the towns around us that are either directly impacted or potentially impacted, to go out, check with the town records, the water department, assessor's office, find out who has an account, who doesn't, then go out and make contact with those property owners to see if they have a private well as their only source of water. And then we offer free testing, and if we test it and it's above the health advisory, then we offer them bottled water as the quick fix, but then for a longer-term solution, carbon and potentially a municipal connection, which we've been doing for the last couple of years in different areas. So it's in terms of folks that might be out there thinking, well, is my well contaminated? We're probably already contacted you. We are doing a newer area right now, which is a little further south. It's south of 151. I mentioned one street, which was Antone, Lane Ave, and a few others in that area. It's right near the Mashpee boundary. So, we've already heard back from 9 folks, and they have private wells as their only source of water, and we've started calling them last week to schedule a time to come by and grab a water sample. And, we gave them a notice, and if there's a problem, then I will call them immediately as soon as we're notified by the lab with the preliminary results, and then get bottled water right to them. I would point out that this is strictly an ingestion concern, and dermal contact inhalation is not something that's of concern per, the information that's provided by the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. And if you grab those fact sheets and look through the ones that I provided to the board members, it gets into a lot of detail about that. So I encourage you all to take a look at that.
Certainly, we appreciate the general's attention to this in appearing before us, along with both of the experts. Doug?
Just one last question. Could you tell me what's going on with the FS-28, the EDB plume? Is that still being extracted?
Sure, yeah. We that plume used to go north of the Coonamessett Pond, and it's through a combination of attenuation and the pump and treat system that we have operating out there. It's really shrunk in size. And we even put a second extraction well further down gradient along the bog area when we had found some ethylene dibromide down there as well. But that's all cleaned up. So we're estimating another 2 or 3 years for that system to operate before it's all gone.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's no longer upwelling to the former bog area. Yeah.
Sam?
Yes, we had a well that suddenly showed up contamination. Have you been involved at all in testing that? I don't know. Ray, did we call them in? Okay. So I was curious to know whether you had any data on what contaminants are in there. Of course, we've already identified some, and what the possible source is.
Mr. Jack, do you want to?
Is this the Fresh Pond well?
Yes. I don't see anything around Fresh Pond here, that's why.
No, our engineers had coordinated our efforts utilizing existing sites as well as existing base sites for that potential contamination in order to try to identify its specific source. So it's been a combined effort, but it is being undertaken by us.
And we don't have any sure identification right now of the source?
No, not at this time.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions?
Madam Chair?
Sure.
We have, I think it was mentioned, we have a representative from DEP. I just thought it might be helpful for the board to, and for me to understand the DEP's role in this.
And thank you
Just
for coming.
briefly.
If you want to introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you all as well, if you Just wait a second. Thank you.
I'm Gerard Martin. I'm the Deputy Regional Director for the Bureau of Wayside Cleanup in the Lakeville office, and we're overseeing the work that Rose and company are doing down here. So we're involved in reviewing their scopes of work, and we'll send out requests for some work and whatnot to make sure that the work is moving forward. And right now, with it being an emerging contaminant, it's kind of a tricky situation because we don't have any standards. Okay, it's a relatively new compound, and so the Mass DEP's Office of Research and Standards is working on coming up with some standards. Under our program, under the Massachusetts Contingency Plan, we tend to have what we call our groundwater standards, and groundwater 1 would be for drinking water. We are currently working on a standard, and the standard should match the health advisory. We're going to be going out for public comment this summer and probably finalizing those regulations before Christmas.
Well, we appreciate the base working on this even before those standards are put together. Great.
Yeah, under our program, we can use some other approaches to get folks to do stuff. We may not have standards. Our standards are often tied to people are required to notify us. But if there's a hazardous material that's been released, we can notify them that work needs to be done. So that's how we've been working with the PFAS in a number of sites across the Commonwealth.
Great. And General, you had some information as well?
We do have some handouts here, but I did want to say, that's fantastic. First of all, I'm lucky.
To the mic, I'm sorry for
this group of people working out at the base, because I surely am not an expert on this, but having the experts right here, most facilities do not have a crew like this, and they've developed such a great relationship with DEP and EPA that I don't worry about what happens between these two. I worry, of course, I'm a Falmouth resident too, I worry about my water, but it's nice to know that I've got a great team of people working on this issue.
Thank you very much. Any other questions?
I just wanted.
You want to come up to the podium, sir, and then Mark?
Thank you. This is David Dow. As I mentioned earlier, I live in Yearling Meadows, development in East Falmouth, which is actually underlain by the Shumat Valley plume. And earlier this year, I testified before EPA and the Corps of Engineers about the Waters of the U.S. program, where they're trying to consider the areas of jurisdiction that cover the Safe Drinking Water Act, the Clean Water Act, Superfund Act, etc. And I actually used the Wacoit Bay watershed as an example of why you should use groundwater in areas that are polluted from groundwater sources and not streams and rivers. Unfortunately, it doesn't appear to me that that's what EPA has in mind. When they revise the waters of the U.S., they want to deal with streams and real rivers and not groundwater sources. So I would urge people to put pressure on them to include our situation so we have some both source of money to help the cleanup, but also regulatory support. Thank you.
Thanks for the comment. And maybe when those hearings are set, we could be advised through the town manager and put them on our website. Thank you. Mr. Finneran.
Mark Finneran, Precinct 6. First, I'd like to make a comment. When you don't have standards, the initial standards that you come up with sometimes are nothing more than a guess. But my question is, we have I believe it's a 10-inch water main that feeds our system down Sandwich Road and is used primarily or in larger amounts in the summertime, and I'd like to know if any of this contamination affects that water. And also, I know that you spent $2 billion roughly cleaning up these other plumes, and maybe I didn't get it right, but you seem kind of laissez-faire about this. But I'd really like to know if this affects any of the water that comes into Falmouth.
Or Mr. Jack, I wonder if you could answer.
There's a 10-inch main that we get water from the base that comes down Sandwich Road and connects to our water system.
You get water from the base?
We get water from the base, yes.
Oh, from the co-op? From
Forever.
Okay. Well, those wells have been tested. There's a well that services the base called the J well, and then there's 2 wells up in the northern part. Is there 2 or 3? 3. Thank you. Thank you. Of course you would know. So 3 wells in the northern part of the base, and Those have all been tested as part of UCMR3, the unregulated contaminant monitoring rule, and they're all non-detect for PFAS. So does that address your concern? And I'm sorry if we come...
Regular testing?
Well, the analytical method that's utilized for those contaminants. Oh, no, it's just done once as part of UCMR3. But we also look at other potential sources on the base, like what I was talking about here. And there's no records of AFFF ever being used up in that area to where they would affect those wells.
Mr. Jack.
Thank you. To answer your question, to answer Mr. Finneran's question, that the main on Sandwich Road, it's not an issue of the mains, it's an issue of where the source water is coming from, not the main itself, regardless of where that main may be. As Rose indicated, we're currently at the UCMR 3, going to the UCMR 4. That means the unregulated contaminant monitoring rule. So at the federal level, for public water systems, what they do is they have what's known as a contaminant candidate list. So there's a list of contaminants out there that the federal government is watching closely for potential future regulation. They do a number of different studies, and by requiring communities to sample for them, they're trying to test the rate of incidence to determine whether or not it will actually become a fully regulated compound. So that's those lists, the unregulated contaminant monitoring rule list. The other term that you heard, the CECs, and as DEP just indicated, contaminants of emerging concern. It's not as though the contaminants are emerging, it's the concern that's emerging over the contaminants. The indicators tonight of PFAS and what have you, the fluorinated compounds, that's one group, but the group is much larger than that. It includes pharmaceuticals, personal care products. There are a number of other constituents that are in very, very small concentrations, so it's not known what, if any, adverse health effects there may be. So that's part of that future regulatory initiative, if you will, and they're trying to assimilate information on that. So from a regulatory perspective, both state and federal, they really want to have a lot of information available before they go too far on regulating these compounds at the part per trillion level. So we used to measure things in parts per thousand. Then we went to parts per million, which is 1,000 times a part per thousand. Then we went to a part per billion, which is where we measure many things now. And these are in the parts per trillion range. So they're unfortunately at extremely small concentrations, but the future regulatory network is probably going to be more geared toward health effects at a much smaller level, like namely the DNA level, is where you're going to see it going in the future.
Thank you. Good history.
I'd just like to make one
Please.
more comment. And I'm sorry if we came across as laissez-faire, but we take this very seriously. We've been doing this for a long time, so we're just very comfortable with it. If you have any other questions, we're happy to talk with you further about it.
And thank you for that.
Indeed.
Doug?
I just wanted to comment and say thank you for the continued initiative, because it's always refreshing to find you guys are continuing to investigate when no one's pushing you, so thank you.
I think it's, it really adds to the public confidence that there's a direct address for these issues by the military. We appreciate that. Thank you very much. Perhaps right on the podium might be good, if it doesn't fall off.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have a request for a waiver of special event permit and sign permit fee for the Falmouth Water Stewards.
I would move that we waive the fees for both.
Second, Alan was here, I think he probably had to
Yeah,
leave.
he saw the
He
meeting
did.
was going to go along and waved
Right.
goodbye.
I saw that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have interview, vote, and appoint incumbents on regulatory boards. Thank you.
Can we just approve them all?
I think we actually, for regulatory, we have to interview.
Okay.
Exactly. Makes sense. Okay, the following incumbents have expressed interest in being reappointed to the following committees. For the Board of Assessors, we have Timothy Skelly and Michael Sullivan, and the term would be June 30, 21. Is Timothy here? Hi, welcome, thanks. I apologize to everyone
Legs getting
for
stiff?
waiting so long. We
Yeah, I
appreciate
was
that.
falling asleep there a little bit, but, very interesting
Tell
stuff.
us how you like the Board of Assessors.
Well, it's been a great term, I believe. Tricia has asked me politely, and sometimes not so politely, to re-up for another term, so here I am. I think we're doing good work, and I just want to continue on. It actually has been a sacrifice. I live in Ballymead. I have 2 young children in the Falmouth school system, and I kind of work off Cape a lot, but I think it's worth it. I'm trying to follow in the footsteps of my mother, who passed in January, and she was 20 years precinct warden and 20 years at the Falmouth Service Center, so I'm trying to carry on the tradition here.
I would move that we appoint Timothy Skelly to a term ending June 30th, 2021.
With a pay increase.
All those in favor? Aye. And great example for your kids, and sorry for the passing of your
absolutely.
mom. She sounds like she was a good example herself.
She loved this town.
Thank you very
Have a
much.
good night.
Thank you for your service. Next, we have Michael Sullivan. Is Mike here? Do we have to reschedule the interview then? Yes?
Board of Health is still meeting, could he be there?
This is Board of Assessors.
Yeah, no.
No.
So do we need to reschedule the interview? We can't appoint without interview.
Do we really need to appoint, to interview?
I don't think this is a regulatory,
Yeah.
so I think you can go forward with
Why
this.
does it say
It
regulatory
says
boards?
regulatory.
It says regulatory boards,
Okay.
Board of Assessors.
We'll reschedule. Happy to
Okay, let's
reschedule.
reschedule Mike Sullivan. Next, we have for the Board of Health,
Oh,
I saw
I see what
Diana.
it is. No, I understand what she's saying. She has regulatory board / committee. Maybe she included some that aren't regulatory. I don't know.
Because the Board of Assessors is not regulatory.
Right.
But it says,
I think she maybe.
Might be a typo.
all right, so do we, I don't want to drag Mike in here if we don't
Can we
have
just
to.
Why don't you make the
Appoint
appointment?
him
If we need to reconsider, we'll so advise.
I move to appoint Michael Sullivan to the Board of Assessors for a term ending 6/30/21.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Ms. Malloy, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman, Selectmen. Appreciate the opportunity to let you know of my interest in continuing on the Board of Health. It's been 3 years now. I've had quite an education, but I think we've done some good work. We have several members that have a lot of interest and certainly expertise in septic systems, et cetera, and what I've tried to bring as a nurse to broaden the scope, and I think we're starting to tackle some different issues, and would like to continue that work.
It's a great perspective.
I move we appoint Diana Malloy to the Board of Health, term ending June 30th, 2021.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Without gratitude.
Thank you, Diane.
Thank you. Next, we have Conservation Commission, Betsy Gladfelder. I saw a minute, oh, there she is. Hello, Dr. Gladfelder.
How you can stay cheerful.
We are.
It's great, actually, it's been an
We owe it
interesting...
to you.
We're wondering the
It's been
same
an-
about you all.
It's been an interesting meeting.
So Conservation Commission.
Conservation Commission. So why do I want to be on for another 3 years?
Haven't you done everything already?
Have I? No. So I couldn't remember what Diane had written, whether you wanted me to say why I wanted to be on, or why I thought you should reappoint me.
I think maybe given the time of the night.
We're just.
Are you willing
to do
It's
it?
one sentence. It's
One
one sentence.
sentence is perfect.
This is a fabulous town, and it's great to see the appreciation most of the people have in town for the natural resources. And I'm glad to help not only maintain, but hopefully improve our resources in the town. And that's why I want to be on.
That's perfect. Thank you, and for the volunteers, great appreciation.
I
for
move
the
appointment
volunteers.
of Betsy Gladfelter to a term ending June 30th, 2021.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Betsy. Next, we have Maureen Harlow-Hawks.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
Maureen was here
I
for
saw
quite
it.
a while, but she had to leave, so I guess she'll have to be
Appoint-
rescheduled.
Well, I think
Let's go ahead.
we're going to appoint,
We're
and
gonna
then
go
when we
for
call
it.
people back that we have to.
That's regulatory.
Oh, it's regular, that is, we do have to call her
Regulatory,
back, that is regulatory.
Give her credit for previous appearance.
Historical Commission, Christopher
Yeah.
Warner. Oh, there you are. I know, right? You were using it as a pillow, I assume.
So did we move approval of Maureen?
We're-
can't, 'cause that's
It's
definitely
regular.
Oh, we can't,
We're
okay.
holding Maury. Hi, thanks for coming.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So far, so good. I'll keep going.
I like that. Brevity.
Go ahead and vote.
I move approval, Christopher Warner, for a term ending 6/30/21 to Historical Commission.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Pleasure. Thank you for your.
Next, we have Zoning Board of Appeals, Terrence Hurry, for a term ending June 30, 2023. Boy, that's brave.
Good evening to the board.
Good evening.
I am expressing my interest to be reappointed to the Zoning Board of Appeals. I'm sure you're all well familiar with us. We've been very busy the past few years with special permits and 40B projects, not to mention some others. I do want to recognize board members who did come in support of my reappointment. Chairman Ken Foreman, he did have to leave early. Ed Van Kuren is right behind me. To our far right corner is Sari Boudreau, our zoning administrator, and Bob Dugan, who also stuck around. Just want to take the moment to appreciate all them. We have been very hard workers recently, and Sari, with all her work that she's done with Ashley DeMello, the secretary, they've done a fantastic job both working with us and the public.
Well said.
Indeed. I move approval of Terrence Hurry to a term ending June 30th of 2023.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And
Thank
it's
you.
nice they came, but we would have done it even without them,
Okay.
because your
Oh, I
work
don't
speaks
know.
for itself.
I don't
so.
know.
Not me, they'd be in here pushing over the top.
Thank you, TJ.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next, we have for affordable housing, there are 3 positions, all terms end June 30, 2021. We have Renee Brown.
It's not regulatory, is that correct?
No.
Correct.
Okay, so we'll,
Can we move? Appoint, I
Yes,
would
they
move
don't
appointment,
appear.
there's only, oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
I can speak, that she actually has attended a number of the Affordable Housing Committee meetings, so even though she couldn't vote, she was there to kind of get up to speed. So I move approval of Renee Brown for a term ending June 30th of 2021.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Next, Agricultural Commission, 2 positions, both terms ending June 30, 2020. Amy Vickers.
I know she was here, but she's getting up at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning for the farm, so.
Oh, right. Heidi Waltz, oh, yes, I was going to say, I know she's here. Hello.
So I took a little break. I'm ready to jump back into the fray.
Lucky for us.
You had a
Oh,
good
yeah.
time, this is great, it's a good time for this commission to have
Yeah.
folks with experience, so it's great.
Yeah, a little, institutional memory.
Perfect. Is there a motion?
Move approval?
I'll
Heidi
second.
Waltz to a position for Agricultural Commission ending 6/30/2020.
And I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank
Is this
you.
regulatory or not? It's not, is
It's
it?
not
No,
regulatory.
agricultural, no.
I would move approval of Amy Vickers for a position on Agricultural Commission ending 6/30/2020.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Beach Committee, 1 position, term until June 30, 2021. Rebecca Moffett.
Who's that?
Hello.
Hello.
This seems like a familiar name.
It does. Why would you like to be on Beach Committee?
Well, I thought about that today, and I thought, what do you say to someone when you tell them they're asking, why would you want to be on a beach committee? Everyone has the answer in their head, and we all know we have the best beaches, so I'd love to be on that committee.
And do you have any experience in municipal government?
It's just beach committee.
Is there a motion?
I move approval.
Oh, sorry, we have 2 more
We got
interviews.
some competition here.
I lost my chart. Thank you. Any questions for Becky?
Oh, there's only 1 position.
Right.
Okay, we'll take the next 2. We have 2 more interviewees.
Okay.
Okay.
Next, we have Jeffrey Billard. Thank you. Hi, why would you like to be on Beach Committee?
Coming back to it.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I was on the Beach Committee in the early 2010s, and I have the experience of doing that. And just a real quick thing, I've been a teacher for over 30 years in Barnstable. I'm a professor at 4 Cs. I'm a professor at Fitchburg State in the graduate school. And I have been coming to Falmouth Beaches since the 60s, when I was a little kid, and so I really care about the Falmouth Beaches. I've studied a lot about it, and I think some of the issues are sand mitigation and the sand loss that we have, and maintaining those beaches, not just for us, but for those little kids that are going to be going to the beaches 50 years from now. It's a huge resource for us, both economically and as a recreationally. And I think that we need to keep going in a direction that we have forethought and vision on. So I enjoyed my time on the beach committee. I had to leave because I had to move out of town for a couple years, but I've been back for about 4 years now, and I'm getting ready to retire. And so it's time to get back on there. And I've worked with Bruce and Jason and all the guys that are still there. So I'd like to be back on the committee.
Okay.
Great. Sam?
Thank you.
What's your academic background? Does it actually complement this position?
I teach English and education and theater. But I think a lot of what I bring from the educational department in terms of working cooperatively in groups and leadership and all of that commends well with focusing on goals and getting them done and building. A lot of the work I do is on building group dynamics and teamwork.
Do you have any good ideas for how to get the rules and regulations out to more people?
Sure. I mean, I think that I followed the rules and regulation process pretty closely as they were doing it, and I think that the website and the television and all of that, I could certainly sit down with the committee and go over a lot of those options. But I think I have a lot to offer the committee. I've been really dying to get back onto it, and now this was the time was right for this. Okay.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
We next have Ed Senegal.
Hello.
Hi, welcome.
My name is Eddie Seneschal. I would like to be on the beach committee because I think I have a little bit of experience. I've been on the beach, working directly on the beach for 33 years. Going to the beach every single day as my job. For the last 24 years, I've had a business. I had a business at Old Silver Beach, where I rented out all kinds of water sports. I no longer have that business. The Seacrest, the new owners, took that business over. I worked together with the lifeguards for 24 years. I worked with Greg Frazier, the harbor master, saving boats and saving people that other people couldn't get to. I worked with the environmental police sometimes. They would give me a call and say, hey, do you see a sailboat in distress? And I would go out and rescue the sailboat. And I would like to bring a little bit more life to the beaches. I'd like to see our beaches be more fun. I like volleyball nets. I like people paddleboarding. I like people kayaking. When I look around on television and I see a commercial for another community that has paddleboarding and kayaking, and they're displaying it in their ads for their community. Come to Falmouth. This is what we have to offer. I see pictures currently of the Falmouth beaches the way they were back in the 70s and 80s, and I'd just like to see a little bit more activity, a little more fun. I'd like a place for our youth where they would want to go to the beach for an activity. If they were able to go to the beach at, whatever, 4 o'clock or whatever time, or a certain place and learn to paddleboard or learn to windsurf or any of these things, it might, we might not have the topic of opioids, or there might be less. I know from a personal standpoint back in the Fort Lauderdale days that this water sports saved my life. I wanted to be healthy. I wanted to go to the beach. I don't think our youth in Falmouth look at our beaches like a fun place to go. Maybe Old Silver, but really when I drive by Falmouth Heights Beach in the summertime, I rarely see a person in the water. I see about 50, 60, 75 people sitting on the beach in chairs, but I rarely see a person in the water. And I said to myself, geez, why aren't there a few people out there paddleboarding? Why aren't they taking advantage of what we have to offer? We have beaches all around the community that every beach on every particular day may not be good for an activity. You know, some days it might be windy in Buzzards Bay, but it's not windy on Vineyard Sound, or vice versa. We can learn those things. I know those things like the back of my hand. I can teach, I can help the beach committee, you know, learn those things. You know, there's places like Magansett and New Silver, the wind's blowing, but you would never know it. You're in there, it's perfectly flat and calm, you know? The town has sailing classes. I'd like to see maybe windsurfing and paddleboarding added into there. Something that the kids are gonna gravitate to, you know? I'd rather see them, I'd rather say, hey, I'm going down to the Old Silver, or I'm going down to Falmouth Heights, and I'm gonna go paddleboarding, Mom, I'll be back later. Instead of going out and riding around the car, you know? I know what it did for me, it did a lot. So I'd like to try to bring that to Falmouth. That's it.
Thank you.
Questions? Doug?
Do you still have some kind of water sports business going on? Or?
I don't have a water sports business in Falmouth. I don't have any water sports at all. Right now, because of the hotel taking me over, I'm in actually bankruptcy.
Oh.
Selling off all the old equipment. So I don't have a location in Falmouth at all. I have that little shack up on the highway where I'm selling my used equipment from.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting too old to run a beach water sports concession. You know, it takes a lot of work. I'm 62 now. You know, I really don't want to be, I won't be back there. I know I won't, at least in Falmouth. So I was concerned about a conflict of interest, you know, and I guess you could look at it both ways, you know. Maybe my experience is not a conflict of interest, or I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to look at it. You know, if you call me up and ask me, hey Eddie, can you come by and teach me and my kids how to windsurf? I'm going to say yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a conflict of interest? I don't know. I'm not sure.
I would think it's only a conflict if you're actually trying to promote a business and then get the space on the beach for the business that you're promoting. So.
Right.
Yeah, no, I'm not trying to get a space on the beach, and I entertained that thought for a while, and I spoke to some people, and I'm just not going there.
Mm-hmm.
Too much, there's too much red tape, and it just wouldn't, you know, it wouldn't work.
Okay.
It wouldn't work at all.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
You're
So
welcome.
we have 3 good candidates to make a
sure do.
decision about. Is there anyone that's ready to make a motion?
I'd like to move that we appoint Ed Senegal to the beach committee.
Okay, is there a second for Ed? Or is there another motion?
Well, I just felt that his comments about actually providing activities for youth and bolstering that part of our beach program makes a lot of sense.
Hearing no second, is there another motion?
I was going to nominate Jeffrey there because I liked his whole take on the reasons why he wanted to do it.
Is there a second for Jeffrey?
Second.
All those in favor of Jeffrey?
Aye.
Aye.
No, this is a tough.
Okay. Congratulations, Jeffrey.
And thank you to everybody else. I hope that they continue to be involved in those meetings that are open, and if there are other openings that come up.
Thank you. Sorry for everyone, it's late. Next, we have Bikeways Committee, 1 position, term until June 30, 2021. Timothy Smith? Not a regulatory, does anyone know?
Move approval of Timothy. Nope, not yet, we're almost there.
Getting there.
Oh, well, no, I think it is Timothy.
Timothy Smith.
I don't think there is.
Is this a typo?
I don't see a Timothy Smith application. in
Hold
there.
on, could be,
It
you
is
could be
Timothy
right.
Shea.
Yes, we have
Our
a typo.
apologies, typo.
They called you Mr.
And we'll
Smith.
change that on the list. Good thing you spoke up.
I move that we appoint Timothy Shea to the Bikeways Committee.
I want to hear what he has to say first.
Well, you know my name.
We do now.
My wife and I resided in North Falmouth since August, but have owned property there for about 12 years. My reason for being here is I thought to learn about the government of Falmouth and how it works, what could be better than to participate and maybe contribute. and I applied for one of several committees, Bikeway Path being one, myself being a very frequent user, an avid biker, and not to get ahead, but the second was the Energy Committee because I've spent my career in project management and construction of energy, waste energy, and other projects of that type, and I think I would bring some relevant experience to the Energy Committee. So those are my two.
We'll look forward to energy. How does the board feel about bike?
I think it's great. I think there's a lot of exciting things happening in bikeways right now. And so hopefully you can hit the ground running, since it seems like you have quite a bit of experience just in project-related matters, period. So I would move approval of Timothy Shea to a position ending 6/30/21 for bikeways.
Second.
All those in favor?
And the only reason why we're
Thank you.
not going with bikeways is that you listed that as your first choice.
Yes.
And energy was number 3, because I know we do have other...
We do have the list.
Yes.
But we'd welcome you on that committee as well.
I think I'd start with one.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks
Sure
for
we can't
coming.
change your mind?
Next, we have for the Building Code Board of Appeals, Fred Giampietro for one position, term until June 30, 2019. Is Fred here? Okay.
I would move approval
Is that regulatory?
or appointment.
No.
No.
If, we can we?
Yes, you can. Go ahead,
We
continue. I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations, Fred. Next, we have the Cultural Council, one position, term until June 30, 2021. Jennifer Washburn.
Hi.
Hi, thanks for coming.
Thank you. I'd like to be part of the Cultural Council. I currently work for the Cape Symphony, and I think that with my marketing background and my background in arts and entertainment, I would be a great asset.
Agreed.
Sounds like it.
I move we appoint Jennifer Washburn to a term on the Cultural Council ending in June 30th, 2021.
Excellent.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Thank you.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Congrats.
Thank you, Jennifer. Look,
Next, we have for Energy Committee, one position, term until June 30, 2019. Rosemary Carey. Welcome.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to be on the Energy Committee because I really love this town. I've vacationed here every year of my life. My husband and I have had a house here since 2000, and we just made it official full-time last year. So as you may know, I am a writer for green and sustainable businesses, and doing that, I'm very accustomed to working with all different kinds of people and groups and learning about their objectives and then turning that into website, work product, whatever, that, calls people to action. I also am an environmental organizer with 350 Cape Cod, and before that founded 350 New Jersey. So I have very strong organizational skills and pride myself on knowing how to pull together somewhat complex projects and stick with it and get results. And I think I can be a very strong asset to the Energy Committee. I've been to 2 meetings already, and that reinforced my feeling that I wanted to be on it.
Great committee group.
Thank you.
Any questions?
No?
Nope,
Move
sounds good to
approval,
me.
Rosemary Carey, if there are no questions, to a position on Energy Committee ending 6/30/2019.
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
very
because it's a vacant position, not a typical position. So
Right.
it's not a
Correct.
2-year.
Yes.
It's just till next year.
Hopefully we'll reapply next year.
Correct. Golf Advisory, one position, term until June 30, 2020. Christopher Iui? Inouye, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to be on the committee. I'm an avid golfer. There 12 months out of the year, and I think I have maybe some ideas about improvements at the golf course. I'm very aware of safety concerns and general operating procedures and things at the course. I know the staff pretty well there, and very familiar with all the local courses, public courses here as well. So I have a pretty good comparison between Falmouth and what the rest of the courses around here have to offer.
Great.
Great, a lot of experience. Any questions?
What do you think about the Falmouth Country Club comparatively?
It's very well run. Conditions are above standard, I would say, right now. There are a couple of areas where there probably could be some changes in terms of some of the safety procedures. Some of the nets, safety nets could be maintained, and there's a tee box that is precariously close to the driving range. That there are some adjustments that I think might make the place a little safer, but overall it's a great place to practice, and it offers something for anywhere from beginners, and I know the high school the team uses that, to more advanced players. It's a really fun recreational opportunity for the town.
I'm glad to hear you got the idea on safety. That's good.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Thank you.
So
And
I would, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say I move approval
Okay.
and appointment to a position till 6/30/20.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations, thank you
Thank
for
you.
coming.
Thank you.
Next, we have the Historical Commission. There are two positions, both terms until June 30, 2021. We have Annie Dean interviewing.
I'll excuse myself from this.
Hi, Annie.
Hi.
I'm here today because I'm very passionate about historic preservation.
Okay.
I have been a resident of Falmouth for 35 years. I've been a town meeting member for 15 years, and I'm very well aware of the issues and concerns and of historic preservation in our town. I had an opportunity last week to meet with the chairman of the committee, Ed Haddad, and the vice chairman, Nicole Goldman, who is here in support of my application today. It's a good committee for me. I want to be involved more in the town. I'm semi-retired. This is a good committee for me because it's small and because it has members who've been involved for 5 to 10 years, so I'll have a learning curve, but I think there'll be a support there for that. I've had an opportunity to review the Historic District's Design Review Guidelines, which I found very compelling reading. So I could go on, but...
Don't you want us to vote for you? Don't tell us you found that compelling.
I think it'd be great. It's a terrific committee, as you know.
Yes.
One thing that people ask me a lot about this committee in particular is, what does the committee do to help people be successful before you? And to really, I'm just wondering if you might have ideas on that, because it seems to come up now and then.
Yeah, actually, I did speak to Ed and Nicole about that, and if you don't mind me quoting you, I think you said that the role is to educate and advocate as well as regulate. And we did discuss how that sometimes the homeowners and businesses aren't really aware of what's required or why it's required when they have a property that's in a historic district. So I think that being aware of that on the committee, perhaps there's things that can be done if they are aware of it. Does that answer your question?
Perfect. Doug?
As a new member, I know you don't have a lot of control over the institutional historical memory of the board, but one thing I've come to realize recently, in recent years, is that as board members come and go, positions on materials may come and go. And I hope that at some point that there's some more standardized things that builders can come to rely on. Like, we went through a phase where aluminum-clad windows were okay for a while, and then they fell out of favor. And then there was a couple of instances where attorneys fought vigorously and were able to do it. And I would hope that we would get to a point where we'd have some consistency that would be longer, reliable. And I know that's not going to be your primary role, but I just want to voice my opinion on that.
I'm glad to hear your concerns as a new member of the committee, certainly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, would you be willing to serve as the Historical Commission's liaison to the Community Preservation Committee?
I think there is someone already going to be doing that.
Somebody's already
Yep.
on, because it's been vacant for at least 2 years. Oh, good.
I'm Ed.
Excellent.
All right.
Well, good. You can't fill that.
Any other questions?
No. No. I would move approval, Annie Dean, to a term ending 6/30/2021, Historical Commission.
Second.
All those in favor?
Thank you.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you for interviewing. Thanks for coming.
One abstention.
One abstention.
Yeah, he's-
Next, we have the Human Services Committee, 2 positions and 2 interviewees. One term is until June 30, 2019, one term June 30, 2021. Ann Beth Ostroff,
She's not here tonight? She's not here tonight?
Holly Wilson,
She is
Oh,
here
yes.
tonight?
she is here tonight.
Would you mind filling both positions?
Why not?
So,
Hi.
Human Services Commission, what piqued your interest?
There's a huge overlap, obviously, with affordable housing, which is my passion of late. But human services, I have a background in that came before affordable housing. I worked at the community health center when I first moved back to town 11 years ago, and I've had a lot of coursework, gerontology, social work, I could go on, but it's at the foundation of all of our problems. So, and housing is foundational as well. So we did have a liaison in a member of the someone who recently became a member of the Affordable Housing Committee, but had been attending meetings for years, longer than I have, and she has withdrawn from both committees, and so I think it's really important to have that liaison and to have the communication going back and forth.
And I know you've been going to the meetings. You've already been going to the meetings.
On and
yeah.
off for years,
Yep.
but recently, I've
More.
gone to the last few just to sort of get a feel for what's going on, as far as I didn't want to apply without having a feel for who is on it now and such. And I'd be on any committee that Florence Davidson is on.
Nice.
I would move that
Learned
we
so much
appoint-
from some of the people that have been around for a while.
Appreciate that,
I
Doug.
move we appoint Holly Wilson to the Human Services Committee term ending June 30th, 2021.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
You got
Thank
the
you.
late term.
And I would move we approve.
I have the, which one? 19?
You have 21.
I have 20.
And next motion, Doug?
I move we appoint Ann Beth Ostroff to the term ending June 30th, 2018.
Second, she's
All
going to
those
be a
in
great
favor?
addition.
Aye.
Aye.
Great.
We need to read these and make those appointments.
Yes.
Madam Chair, could I raise another question?
Please.
I note there's a vacancy on the Council on Aging, and one of the applicants is here tonight and has listed that,
Oh,
I
yes.
believe.
Which is?
I believe Rebecca Moffett
Rebecca
listed that as her
Ah, she's
second
holding
choice.
out.
Oh, that, good catch.
If the board would,
Good
Nice.
catch.
So do you
Ms.
consider
Moffett.
That's a slam dunk.
Would you be willing to take
I
that?
think I would have brought it up.
I think,
I think I kind of sat for a while. I might have been a little frivolous concerning that beach committee.
No, I don't
But I
think
think
so.
the interest was that while the meeting was going on, I was having quite a conversation with the fellow next to me when I realized he and I were both interested in the same position. But I really would say that any time you say the elderly to me, I will volunteer. I've been a member of Neighborhood Falmouth, which I believe all of you recognize what Neighborhood Falmouth does for our elderly. And I've been on that board for 6 years. I've stayed very committed to it. I understand to a certain point what is needed with people at a variety of ages. And sometimes it's just someone to be concerned about them. They shouldn't feel lonely. They shouldn't have needs of hunger or housing. And I think many times the people that are really concerned about elderly or aged residents, we take care of them. And I think Falmouth does a wonderful job, and it would be very good for me to be on that committee. So I ask for your vote for that.
I would move we appoint Rebecca Moffett to the Council on Aging term ending June 30th, 2021.
Second?
We all second
all
that.
those in favor?
Appreciate
Aye.
your patience.
Great.
Appreciate you
Yeah.
staying,
Thank you.
that's great. I do want to announce that we do have 2 positions for a Board of Survey open, 1 position for Cable Advisory, 1 position Coastal Pond Management, 1 position Council on Aging. Nope, that was just Bill, thank you. EDIC 1 position, that does have specialty requirements Finance Committee, 2 positions until the November town meeting, and then the Sign Review Committee, 1 full position and 2 alternatives, in case anyone at home is interested. And the list that, oh, thank you, appreciate that. We're now going to reappoint non-regulatory board committee incumbents. These are all incumbents who have expressed interest in being reappointed to the following committees. I guess I'll just read through about half and then ask for a vote, and then the other half. The first one is Affirmative Action. That's Scoba Rhodes and Pamela Harding Barrett, both till June 30, 2021. Next, Affordable Housing, Holly Wilson, June 30, 2021. Next, Agricultural Commission, Matt Churchill, June 30, 2021. Next, Bikeways, Joanne Fishbein, June 30, 2021. Ron Zweig to Cape Light Compact to June 30, 2021. And Council on Aging, Brenda Swain, Joe Clancy, Susan Gallagher, and Susan Ripley, all to June 30, 2021. Cultural Council, Bobby Balin, Jane Pariah, Lee Graybaws, Michael Halen, and Sam Houghton. Bobby's until November 30, 2019. The rest are until June 30, 2021. And I'll take a motion.
Move a motion to approve all those appointments.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next, Commission on Disabilities, Edward Sullivan and Rona Carlton-Foss, both till June 30, 2021. Energy Committee, Megan O'Reilly, June 30, 2021. Human Services Committee, Tanya White and Karen Delaney, June 30, 2021. Recreation Committee, Richard Bowles, Tom Zine, June 30, 2021. Sign Review Committee, Linda Clark, June 30, 2021. Steamship Authority Port Council, Robert Munier, June 30, 20. Upper Cape Regional Transfer Station Board, Ray Jack, June 30, 2019. Upper Cape Regional Water Supply Co-op, Carrie Murphy, June 30, 2021. Veterans Council Committee, Kevin Casey, Robert Foose, and Randy Collette till June 30, 2021. Water Quality Management Committee, Ron Zweig and Steve Layton, June 30, 2021.
I move appointment of all those members of the committees.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Next, we have to discuss and vote a date for the Board of Selectmen retreat. Discussion, I wanted to start with the idea, this is a retreat where the board talks about its strategic plan going forward. Attendees are usually the town manager and the assistant town manager. I'm going to make a pitch again, not to pay money for a facilitator. I think with such a small group, we can probably be a little more productive without a facilitator, but that's just something I wanted to pitch and see how the board felt.
I would think some years it's useful. I think with it being the same board we've had for a few years, it may not be as necessary this year.
I agree with that sentiment. I think it has a role to play in certain years. I don't know that it's an expenditure that we need this year in particular, just given the makeup of the board and kind of the what's been done as a foundation in the last couple of years.
Any other thoughts?
No problem with that.
What about, in that case, dates and places? Mr. Sousa, did you have a calendar in mind on that?
Calendar, some suggestions. If you want to
Please.
be looking at the month of June, and I think the board met most recently at the water filtration facility, which is, I think we found to be a good venue if the board is comfortable with that. And I think the last time we met on a weeknight there, but it would be up to the board. I tossed out a couple of dates that had come from a potential facilitator, but certainly you wouldn't be limited to that, given that we wouldn't be using one this year. I would just suggest to give us a little bit of time preparation, that maybe consider that last week of June, maybe the 27th, that's a Wednesday, or a Thursday the 28th.
And afternoon time, you thinking dinner time?
Well, I was thinking perhaps a 5:30 start or a 6 o'clock start, depending on selectmen's availability on a weeknight.
I may have a conflict. I have something on my schedule, it's a meeting that I haven't yet confirmed, but
Can we do the 26th, the Tuesday?
Both dates, 27th and 28th, Doug?
no,
Brown
just
or
the
Ben?
just the 27th would be the only
Okay.
conflict for me.
So Tuesday or Thursday, the 26th or 28th?
Either one is fine.
Sam, are you good with?
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
Tuesday,
The 26th.
that would be a little bit tough for me, but I could make it.
So,
Rob works
let's-
that night, so I have no.
what about
commitment on
Thursday?
childcare. Thursday's okay.
Doug, are you good for Thursday?
Thursday would be a little tougher, but it's not childcare issues, so I could probably work around it.
I would suggest starting a little bit earlier, maybe at 5. Is that doable?
It
It's
is.
fine, yeah.
And how long do we usually go? At least a couple of hours.
3 hours, just to,
So 5 to 8 would make sense.
Then I could do that I'll just make that work on the 26th. If
Could
that
that be
is a day
great?
that works for folks.
I think we have a Senior Center Building Committee meeting on the 26th. It's
Okay.
either the 26th or the 27th, but I think it's the Tuesday.
which Peter normally routinely attends, and I try to sit in on, to,
Of course.
Okay.
not saying
28th.
that should kill that date, though.
Doug, how do you feel about the 28th?
I'll make it work.
Okay, so it'll be the
Oh, thank you.
28th, 5 to 8 at the water treatment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Doug.
Just going to make sure I get this so I don't not show up. Okay, good.
Whoops, let's put it on for the Monday.
Next, we have discuss and vote the date of July 9th for the joint meeting with the Finance Committee to interview and appoint members to fill vacancies. Does the July 9 date work for everyone?
As far as I know, it works.
It's my wife's
Yeah,
birthday.
it's a Monday,
That's
so
That's a
Bring her,
good
that's
thing,
a
right?
great
It's-
birthday present. Bring her.
It's economical, right.
She probably has a historical commission meeting that
Yeah.
night.
Oh, right, okay.
I have it already listed as,
Yeah,
we
we-
had it as a Board of Selectmen meeting,
we
so,
did, yeah.
yeah. So that's fine.
I would move that we have July 9th for a joint meeting with the Finance Committee.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Next, we have individual selectmen's reports.
Well,
It's really late.
Yeah.
I was interested to attend an Oak Bluff Selectmen's meeting a couple weeks ago, right after our last meeting. It was very interesting. They were a little bit more of a smaller town kind of a atmosphere. And I remember Selectman Packish had told me previously how his town is very business-friendly, and they take action quickly to facilitate business, and they certainly proved it at their meeting. They had several people looking for special permits to run businesses, and they were super friendly with them and helpful and explained the process and took some of them right in from the first day and approved them and said, good luck, and it was very interesting. The reason I was there was to attend to hear their discussion about an idea, the report, I don't remember the name of the report now, but studying baling the trash and potentially barging it. And they weren't really ready to discuss it at length, but they did agree to study up on it and put it on a future upcoming joint all-island selectmen's meeting. And so they've already scheduled that for June 14th.
And we've been invited.
And we've been invited, exactly. So I'm planning to attend that, and if anybody wants to join me, we can. So that's pretty interesting. I was also attended the Coastal Resiliency Action Committee meeting this week, and they had the presentation of the sediment transport study that's done by Applied Coastal, John Ramsey. It was very interesting to learn all of the information that he had and all the historical knowledge that he brought, that he had learned about the site. So I learned a couple things that I thought I knew, that I didn't. It was also interesting to learn that his initial findings were that it might be best to install 3 small groins there and beach nourishment, and he thinks that we might get as much as 50 years out of it. Also interesting to learn that if we don't take action now, the the basic study says that it'll probably get, maybe 20 or 30 years out of that roadway before it's washed out permanently. But he did another study based on the information that he gathered during this process, and he showed where the new study showed where the new 5-year mark would be, and it's almost a third of the way to the road.
Wow.
And I said, that seems to conflict with the original 30-year plan, and he said he believes it does conflict, and so maybe the new information says it's only maybe 15 years or so to get to the roadway. So we're really going to have to take action quickly if we want to save that roadway, or at least preserve it for some longer period of time.
Good information.
Yeah.
Sam?
Just one event. Prior to disappearing for 13 days, I went to the VIPS recognition dinner, which is always a really neat event, recognizing the multitude of people who volunteer in our public schools. And it's always neat to see people get together and be praised individually in many cases for exceptional efforts. So, and I just mentioned the dinner, so it's another way to support the VIPS program, which, as far as I can tell, having lived around the country, is unique in the country. There's no program as strong as our VIPS program. It's pretty impressive.
Excellent. Megan?
Just two quick things. I was at our event that we had worked on with Mass DOT for bike safety for the J1 visa student workers who come here, as well as any workers that come for the summer. They had a great presentation they were ready to do around biker safety, a lot of swag to give out to help people stay safe, lights, bells, all kinds of things, and no one showed up. So we have another one planned. We already had it scheduled for June 19th, and what we're going to do is work again with some of the businesses to get out the information that we might do something like offer some kind of pizza or food or something to get some more of the young people there, so we can give them the information around biker safety, because it is really important. So hopefully we'll try to make the second one more successful. Since that ended pretty early, I went over to it was at the same time to the graduation of the Citizen Police Academy, and that's always a wonderful event. And it's great to see there was a pretty decent sized class of graduates from all different walks of life, all different ages, and so just one of those things that our community does, our police department does, in terms of outreach, to really give people a better understanding of what the police do, and to make that kind of community connection stronger. So great job by Chief Dunn and Sergeant Cummings, who really promote, and all the officers who come in and speak and present. But it was a great event. So
it was a big one, and I just want to the J1, the program came out of those foreign students and workers who were there was an injury and
yes.
A serious issue walking at on the side of the roadway, and
right.
So this has been a long time coming. Megan and I reached out to the Chamber of Commerce. Megan's really carried the ball on this, and it's a very important program. So I hope any of the employers out there that think, some of their employees could benefit would really calendar that day for them.
Right. It is the first time we've tried to do it here, and it does take a little while. Other towns on the Cape have done it for a while now, so it has some traction. I think it's just going to take a little while to kind of get up off the ground, because it's not something that we've done in this community before. So
right.
It'll get there.
More visibility.
Yep.
I attended, along with the town manager, the FCTV annual meeting, which had some great awards, and just that's a company of people that the town really depends on in terms of getting the information out, but particularly the government channel. So really commend all the volunteers and the creative people that work with younger folks, and just very generous and give a lot to the community. So thanks to all of those people.
Just wanted to congratulate all the people who participated in the Memorial Day celebration.
Mm-hmm.
A bunch of us were there, but it really is a wonderful event that Falmouth should be very proud of. That we show tribute to our veterans that way.
Absolutely. Town Manager's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I want to echo Doug's comments about the terrific annual Memorial Day ceremony. Always pleased to participate in that. And last Thursday and Friday, I was pleased to attend the spring annual conference of the Massachusetts Municipal Management Association, and thank you for that opportunity. That concludes my comments.
Mr. Johnson-Staub?
Just very briefly, that things are ticking up a little bit in terms of housing activity. We have 4 restricted units that have potential pending sales or transfers, and Carla, Pat Harris, and I, and Sari Boudreau, among others, are pursuing that. You'll have a written report this week and possibly potential actions to take as soon as your next meeting.
And did I see an advertisement in the Enterprise?
I'm sure you did for...
I thought
Which
an affordable
address?
housing unit. I thought Holly might have brought it. Anyway, good work out there, and it looks like we're really moving on that end.
And also a couple of applications for funds to the Falmouth Affordable Housing Fund, which will be coming your way as well.
Wow, great news.
Move we adjourn?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Excellent.
Got your coat?
Welcome to the Falmouth Chamber of Commerce. The Falmouth Chamber is dedicated to working on behalf of our members to make Falmouth a better place to live, work, and conduct business. We are committed to developing the economic, cultural, educational, and civic interests of our community and welcome the support from all organizations to achieve our combined goals. Whether you call Falmouth home, are a summer resident, or a visitor, we hope you take advantage of all that the Chamber has to offer.
Holiday Inn Falmouth opened year-round for your business and travel needs. We provide a full restaurant and accommodations for banquets, holiday parties, weddings, corporate events, seminars, and more. Featuring KC Bar and Grill, where guests or Falmouth residents can enjoy our selection of local craft beers, cocktails, and a variety of pub food from our menu. Holiday Inn Falmouth, your home away from home.